Are we good to go, Marcy? Okay, all right. Good evening and welcome to the Paso Robles Planning Commission meeting for December 13th. This will be our last meeting of the year. I'd like to call the meeting to order, and we begin with the Pledge of Allegiance. So if you please stand and address the flag, we'll do that. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic which stands one nation, under God, indivisible, with justice for all. Thank you. Can we get a roll call, please, of the Planning Commission?
Commissioner Christensen? Present. Commissioner Neal? Commissioner Gibson?
Present.
Commissioner Davis?
Here.
Commissioner Covarrubias?
Here.
Commissioner Jorgensen? Chairperson Kogler?
Here.
Record will reflect that Jorgensen and Neal are absent.
Okay. Could we have staff introductions, please?
Warren Frace, Community Development Director.
Marcy Reynoso and Ashley Peterson, administrative assistants.
Katie Bannister, Associate Planner.
Lori Wilson, Assistant Planner. Darcy Delgado, Associate Planner.
David Athy, City.
Isaac Rosen, Assistant City Attorney.
Okay, thank you. At this point on our agenda, we're ready to take any general public comments regarding matters that are not on the agenda this evening. I don't see anybody in the chamber, so I assume there's none coming from here. Do we have anybody that's calling in with any?
No, we do not.
Okay, thank you. We will move on then to item F on the agenda, which are items that are proposed to be tabled or rescheduled. Do we have any?
There are none.
Okay, thank you for that. Move on to item G, public hearings. We have two this evening. The first is public hearing for a time extension for the Marriott Fairfield Inn and Suites, P16-0005, TEX 22-05, CUP 15-020, AMD 15-005. Property is located at 2940 Union. It's APN 025-362-004, and the applicant is the Paso Highway Hotel Partners, LP. Before we begin this, it's my understanding that there may have been on the online version a switch with another staff report. Does that pose any issues when holding a hearing on this for this evening?
Chair, I can address that. And then I'll let Marcy speak to just the revision on the agenda. But I would note that the agenda was posted within this 72-hour Brown Act requirement and clearly denoted the Marriott Fairfield Inn and Suites public hearing for the entitlements listed on the screen and the CEQA determination. So from a Brown Act perspective, the item was properly noticed, and then the materials were supplemented to that required agenda posting.
Okay, very good. With that commentary, we will move forward with our first public hearing of the night. May we have a staff report, please?
Thank you, Chairperson Kogler. So this first item is a time extension for a previously approved project. It's a hotel project, the Marriott Fairfield Inn and Suites, which is proposed out near Union Road. So here is a map of that part of town. So you can see Union as it swoops up and then swoops back down towards Barney Schwartz Park. I've superimposed the site plan for the project there on the site. So 2940 Union Road. The request is for a 2-year time extension. It does include a time extension for both the development plan and the conditional use permit for the project, which is a 119-room hotel. So there are some changes proposed out in this part of town to the circulation for Union Road. This is a conceptual. This plan line is not pitch perfect, but this is where we think Union Road will be realigned to. I'm going to superimpose on the project there. So eventually Union Road will actually be south of the project. Of course, it's north of it today. Just to give some perspective of where this project will land when the roads have been realigned. Here is a closer look at that site plan. It's been rotated by 90 degrees, so north is now to the right, entering off of existing Union Road, kind of the grand entry there, and you see the entry to the hotel, and then the parking kind of wraps around. So this is the project that was, the elevation that was recently approved by the Development Review Committee. The originally approved project back in 2017 did have a slightly different elevations. The applicant wanted to make some redesigns. Darren actually took this project to the DRC twice this year. The first time the DRC did not find that the amendments the DRC did not find that those amendments were consistent with what the Planning Commission had approved, but the applicant did do another redesign brought back to DRC in November, and those were deemed to be substantially compliant with what the Planning Commission approved. So here on the left is what was approved in the original CUP, the original development plan, and then on the right, the DRC recently approved some slight changes. They're lettered there. I think there's some changes to the stucco material. There's some joints added. There's some slightly different colors, but the overall appearance, the arched roof at the entry, and some of the kind of most important features were retained. This is located at the gateway to our city, so the DRC felt like that was really important to keep the original design as much as possible. So the project was originally, and I guess I misspoke, it was originally approved in 2016, 119-room hotel. Oh, and here's where 2017 comes in. There was a modification made in 2017. There's been 2 time extensions since that time. And then, as I said, the DRC has reviewed as well recently. The staff has also been reviewing building permits for the project. I think the last time we gave corrections to the applicant was about a year ago, but we are anticipating a new submittal for building permits, hopefully in the near future. So the project is still is consistent with the mitigated negative declaration that was approved by the City Council back in 2016. The language here at the bottom has been provided by the City Attorney's Office, noting that the project is consistent with the state CEQA guidelines section 15162, which notes that if a project hasn't had substantial changes and that there's no sort of major differences between when the project was approved and when it is getting a time extension, no subsequent environmental review is necessary. So this project does fall within that category. The Planning Commission has options. The first would be to approve the draft resolution that would grant a 2-year time extension and would find that the project is consistent with the mitigated negative declaration. You could grant the time extension for a shorter period of time. You could also amend or modify or reject the above options. Staff is recommending a slight modification to the draft resolution, again, to comply with the new, there's some new case law about CEQA and how we list CEQA compliance in our resolutions and in our agendas, and so this language should be added to the resolution to make so that the Planning Commission makes the finding that no subsequent environmental review is necessary, again in compliance with CEQA guidelines section 15162, and that concludes my report.
Very good, thank you. Any questions? Discussion points from the Planning Commissioners. Let's start with Commissioner Covarrubias.
I just have one for staff. So it's already had 2 extensions. If we approve this, it's the 3rd. I always forget. How many extensions are they allowed?
So state law does have a limitation on how many extensions a subdivision map can receive, and the next project that we'll hear tonight is reaching the end of its life. There's nothing in our municipal code that limits the number of times you can extend a development plan or a conditional use permit. At some point, it makes sense maybe that a project has kind of led its life and maybe it needs to not be extended. As I said, we have been working with the applicant in this case, and so it's we are seeing forward motion, and so a time extension does seem appropriate. If a map was associated with this project, a total of 8 years. So 2 years, the original life of the map, and then additional 6 years of extensions.
Okay. All right. Thank you. No other questions.
Commissioner Davis.
Yeah, Katie, I don't know what that is.
Sounds like
Sorry about that. We're working on it.
Hi all, it's Isaac. I just wanted to note if we were taking a pause.
Yes, there was, we were hearing some background noise here in City Hall.
Okay, got it. So we're just pausing on the item while staff works through the noise coming from the remote.
That's correct.
Okay, thank you.
Are we ready to proceed or proceed cautiously?
Not yet.
Not yet. Okay.
Lots of buttons.
We'll watch for a high sign.
We may proceed.
Okay. Mr. Davis.
All right, Katie, I'm the elder here. I remember voting on this some time ago. Please clarify, this isn't anything to do with the extension. I'm actually fine on that. But with the realignment, and David's here, but with the realignment of Union, will that in any way affect the entrance into this facility? Could you comment on that? Or could David comment on that?
Yeah, of course, Mr. Athy, you're welcome. But I believe in the future, Union Road, there'll be a little kind of a driveway coming off of it. Let's see if I can get to that slide. Are you able to move it?
Sorry, David, I always have a circulation question. You know me.
I like circulation.
I know you do.
It's like yeah.
Hi, David Athy, city engineer. So no, the short answer is no. The project is designed to take access off Union Road now, and then in the future, they could have a access in the back to the hotel, and then also, I don't have a laser. Do you have a laser pointer? In the future, this section here will still be extended. So this little blue line that comes off, this will be extended up and have a cul-de-sac. So their access will remain.
That will be the intended entrance because it's beautiful front entrance into the facility.
So they're part of the plan for the Union Road overpass. They're providing this back section of right-of-way to us as part of their development plan. So it's all tied together with the long-range plan for the overpass.
All right, thank you. I appreciate that.
Mr. Christensen.
Thank you. I just have one follow-up to Mr. Athy, if you wouldn't mind, since you're already up there. Well, almost. In regards to that, could you foresee that the alignments or any issue with the Caltrans overpass or anything like that delaying this any further? Probably not happening in the next couple of years. Or what would you say the timeframes are for that?
For the Union Road overpass, well, right now there is no time frame other than we're pursuing grants as fast and furiously as possible. Naturally, we'd like to start it within the next couple of years, but it could happen realistically anywhere from getting the funding now to actually constructing it, starting 4 years out probably from now if we had funding today.
And I guess, and that would mean basically it's not going to affect them moving forward to build out?
No, they'll be able to build their project and
Okay.
they'll be long done before we get any sticks coming out of the ground.
Great. Okay. Thank you. I appreciate that. And the only other question I had was, has the applicant taken any other further action recently since the last time that it was before the planning?
So there were some images in the presentation where they did bring a redesign to the Development Review Committee recently, but the applicant is on the line as well, so we could hear from them. But we have not had a resubmittal for the building permit for about a year.
Okay. All right. That's it for me. Thank you.
Mr. Gibson.
I had a follow-up question from Commissioner Davis because that was actually my only question. So, David, could I ask you to use your pointer and just that extension of Union Road that you had marked is how far long is that going to go? Is it going to go all the way to the blue, yellow section, or is it going to stop somewhere?
You're talking about this section here?
Correct. Yeah.
Yeah. So somewhere in here, it'll be a little cul-de-sac.
It'll stop.
that's built. Yeah, the city owns this property right here.
Okay,
Um,
so everything past that's going to eventually disappear? Is that correct?
well,
That curve to the east?
This right here, you know, we're looking at having right in, right outs at these locations for access. But yes, the long-term plan is to have, you know, these connections. The left outs definitely are going to go away here as with part of this project. So over time, this whole interchange area will morph and change depending on traffic levels and the stage of the project.
All right. Yeah, my
I
only
think,
thought,
just to clarify something on this, so what's shown here is basically phase one of the overcrossing, which is the bridge, but none of the on-ramps and off-ramps. So because of that, Union Road and Paso Robles Boulevard, which is the street across, those stay. The left turns get cut off, they become right-ins and right-outs.
Okay.
That's probably going to be the existing condition for the next 20 to 30 years.
Okay.
There is no plan to move forward with building the full interchange. That requires 2 more bridges across Wero Creek. The city's got no need to ever do that. So from the city standpoint, this is probably the final project the city ever does.
All right.
So I would expect that Union Road connection to 46 to be there for decades.
Okay.
Yeah, so Warren's right. I was thinking ahead, way far ahead in the future, but yes, this will still connect.
That'll still be
there. And they'll still have access, full access actually over. And I just wanted to add, just for the commission's, for the background, I have been working on the frontage improvements for this project and have been recently contacted, even though the building permits have been, they're, you know, whatever the stage they're in, the frontage improvements along here, I've been working directly with their engineer on those recently.
Thank you for the clarification. Again, my concern was not even just the ingress and egress, but the fact that the front, in essence, the front of the hotel is facing to the northeast. And if their access was from the opposite direction, it would seem like we need a complete building redesign. So I'm reassured that that's not necessary. Thank you.
Okay. I really don't have any questions. I was on the DRC when this was reviewed recently, and they certainly seemed like a development group and representative that we're in the process of moving forward. So I certainly support this. This is a public hearing. We will now open the public hearing and hear comment. Is there any comment from anybody in the room? I see that there probably is not. Is there any comment from anybody that's calling in, Marcy?
Yes, we do have callers. Give me a moment to connect. Neil, we have you on the line.
Yes, ma'am.
Go ahead.
No particular comment from me, but Rob Miller will be saying a few words.
I believe Neil's the applicant.
He's also.
Okay. If anybody speaks, would you please identify your name and who you're with, please?
Apologies. Neil Patel from the applicant, Paso Highway Hotel Partners. No comments from me at this time. Happy to answer any particular questions, but I believe Rob Miller, who will be speaking next on the phone, would like to say a few words.
Proceed, please, Mr. Miller.
Give me just a moment. I'll just get Mr. Miller on there. Mr. Miller, can you hear us?
I can.
Go ahead.
Oh, hi, folks. Rob Miller, Wallace Group, the applicant, civil engineer. Thank you, Mr. Chair and commissioners. We certainly appreciate your consideration this evening and the accommodation for hybrid participation in the meeting. Definitely makes it easier. We are moving forward on the project. I'm glad David was able to chime in and indicate that the frontage improvements are being worked on actively. And now that we have confirmation through DRC, if given an extension tonight, we plan to get financing for the project and look to pull our building permits. You may be aware that the same owner group broke ground and is constructing the residence inn off of Vine Street. So that one's well into construction, and we look forward to getting this one over the finish line with permits and getting in the ground. So thank you for your consideration tonight.
Thank you, Mr. Miller. You may have heard we've got a tone problem in the chambers here we're working on. We'll pause for just a moment.
It's on. We're back.
Thank you. We apologize for that delay.
Oh, Chair. Sorry, I just wanted to note, can we get confirmation too that the chambers confirm that those dialing in remotely can be heard? And I'm dialing in remotely so I can see it, but I just want to make sure we still have those capabilities confirmed up and running.
Yes, we can hear you.
We can hear you, and we heard from Mr. Patel and Mr. Miller. Are there any other callers with comments on this issue?
Not for this item, no.
Okay. Hearing none, we will close the public hearing and bring this back to the commission. Commissioners, any further discussion or anybody care to offer a motion?
I'm prepared to make a motion.
Commissioner Gibson.
I move to approve Resolution 22-XXX, granting a 2-year time extension for Plan Development Amendment 15-005 and Conditional Use Permit 15-020, extending entitlements to January 24th, 2025, and amending the resolution to make the finding that no subsequent environmental review is necessary because the extension of the project entitlements would not result in any significant environmental impacts not considered in the original or in the approved M&D. There is no substantial evidence in the record suggesting any of the criteria set forth in state CEQA guidelines section 15162 is met, and accordingly, no subsequent environmental review is necessary.
Okay, we have a motion. Do we have a second?
I'll second that.
Mr. Christensen seconds. Any further discussion? Hearing none, I'll ask staff please call the roll.
Commissioner Gibson?
Aye.
Commissioner Christensen?
Aye.
Commissioner Covarrubias?
Aye.
Commissioner Davis?
Aye.
Chairperson Kogler?
Aye.
Motion passes 5-0.
Okay, thank you. We will move along to our second public hearing, which may be a little bit of deja vu. It's another time extension for a hotel, this time for Destino Hotel Resort, P16-0034, TEX 22-08, PD 08-002, CUP 08-002, and VTTM 2962. The project is located at 3350 Airport Road, APN 025-436-030. And the applicant is Karen Steyer. We have a staff report, please.
Thank you, Chairperson Kogler. So yes, once again, this is a time extension for a hotel. This one is just north of the 46 instead of being just south. So here's a similar map of Highway 46 East there on the bottom, and then you see Airport Road. The area in red would be the new hotel resort. Here is the site plan superimposed. So there are 4 hotel buildings totaling 229 hotel rooms in this project. So the request is also for a 2-year time extension. This would be the final extension per the Subdivision Map Act. The map has an original life of 2 years, and then the city can approve up to 6 years of extensions. There have been 2 other 2-year time extensions. So this time extension would be the final time extension. It would extend the map out, its life out until 2025. A little bit of history on the project. There were some amendments to the kind of most recent full approval for the hotel resort was in 2017, where there were some amendments made. It does include a 6-lot vesting tentative tract map. And then, as I said, I think I misspoke the number, but 4 hotels with a maximum of 291 rooms. I think I said 292 before, but 291. And then the applicant has reported to us that she is working to secure investors. And so that has been the delay, along with COVID and supply chain issues and so forth. So again, here's the site plan. The north is up in this image. So Airport Road is there on the left. This is just zooming in a bit. So like I said, 4 hotel buildings, the larger hotel there, Hotel 1 kind of towards the middle, and then 3 smaller hotel buildings. And then there are some red arrows on this showing where the subsequent views that we'll see where you're looking from Airport Road. So view 1 is at the top there, view 2 from the bottom, and then view 3 is kind of towards the center. So first, here is the view 1. This is the entry. So from Airport Road, looking up the hill, you'd see some of the hotels from the road. I think that would be not sure which hotel. We could go back to the site plan, but anyway, you can see the kind of the grand entry going in, and with some improvements made to Airport Road as a part of the project. The view 2 was from that southwest corner, so looking kind of northeast. You can see 2 of the hotel buildings from Airport Road, and again, there's Airport with its with the improvements shown. And then that final view is kind of towards the center of the property, looking more or less due east, and you see the hotel, the different buildings as you step up the hill. As I said, there is a tentative tract map involved. This shows you where the different lines of the different lots would be located. The different hotels are located on different lots. There's also some, I think, existing residences that would be retained as well. This project is within some of the airport land use areas, and so they do have to limit the density of the hotels and kind of where they go, but this is just showing you where those different hotel land use zone area boundaries are on the property. This project similarly is consistent with the mitigated negative declaration that was approved by the City Council back in 2017. It was Resolution 17-005. So similarly, we will want to reference the CEQA guidelines section 15162, which is the same justification for saying that this project is consistent with its previous CEQA designation. Again, the Planning Commission has options. The first would be to approve the draft resolution that would grant that 2-year time extension for the development plan, for a conditional use permit, and then also for that vesting tentative tract map. It would extend it to 2025. As I said before, you could certainly make modifications to that resolution, including doing a shorter time period if that's desired. If you want to see this come back to you more sooner, you could refer it back to staff if you need more information, or if you want to make findings to deny the project, that is also an option. Similar to the previous project, staff's recommendation is to approve the draft resolution to extend the entitlements for another 2 years, and again to add to the resolution to make the finding that the project does not need a subsequent environmental review consistent with CEQA guidelines section 15162. And that is the end of my presentation.
Great, thank you. Planning Commission discussion, questions. Commissioner Christensen, let's start on your end.
Katie, I had a question in regards to at the end of this time frame, this being the last extension, if it's granted, what then would happen with this potential map?
So the map would expire. The applicant could certainly make another application for a similar project, but it would open up the entire project to review with, kind of every current standards, all that's going on within the city. The map is a vesting tentative tract map, so the vesting that comes along with that map would no longer be vested back to 2017. It would be vested to, the current application, the application date, I should have said.
Okay. And so there hasn't been a lot of activity on this, just the request for extensions so far?
As far as I'm aware, yeah. We've never had a building permit submitted for this project.
Okay. That's it for me. Thank you.
Mr. Gibson.
Thank you. I do have a couple of questions. I'm looking on page, see if I have a page number. Looks like it must be page 52. And on the, it's basically showing a plot map, and on the far left side, it says something I'd just like to understand what this significance of it is. It's indicating the access road says a 50-foot private access easement and PUE per whatever is to be abandoned. Okay, so what is to be abandoned? Because that looks like a primary access road to at least two of the hotels.
Yeah, I did not, I was not the original planner, but looking at this, what it looks to me is that there was an easement, an existing easement that's private access and a PUE. But if you look further to the east between parcels 3 and 4, there's a proposed offer to dedicate that. So it would be a full offer to dedicate a road. And so certainly you'd have access, there'd be access rights to the public as well as for utilities. So I believe the intent is to replace the easement with a full offer to dedicate.
All right, so following up on this same line of questioning, all the way to the east side of the property, it looks like there is a road that continues on to another and provides access to another parcel. So on your map, it'd be to your right. What is the access to that property? Looks like the William Mundy property.
Right, I believe that there's I'm going to zoom back to the map or the aerial.
I'm just curious, in other words, if we're abandoning something.
That is the Mundy property, the old ranch, and Mundy had actually applied for a general plan amendment to turn that into also a resort lodging use, but he only has one access point off 46, so he couldn't move forward. As this Destino project was going through the process, he negotiated adding this access, which then would provide him the ability to have 2 points of access for potential development of his property. So that was the idea. His project hasn't moved forward either. It's still dependent on this project moving forward, but that was the idea behind why that road was established.
All right, so if I understand what information you're conveying to me is that there is some sort of access easement that would be abandoned and then be replaced by a 50-foot new road, and that would provide the access for Mr. Mundy. And that's what we're showing on the, depending on what direction you're coming from. Is that correct, from the east?
Correct, yeah. It would be an offer to dedicate, and then that sounds like it would be a second access for Mundy.
Okay, all right, thank you. And again, I picked up when I was trying to figure out what was going on with this plot map. Could you educate me again, and what is safety zone 2, 3, and 4? Does that have to do something with the airport, or what are those, and what's the significance of those?
Yeah, so the airport land use plan is an overlay that, lays on a lot of the land that is in the vicinity of the airport. And so different safety zones, there's different uses that are allowed or not allowed. There's different densities that are allowed. We don't want people to congregate in large numbers where, there's a higher likelihood that a plane could crash or there's noise concerns, that kind of thing. So this project was originally limited knowing that this was within the airport safety zones. And so the project, went through review and made sure that it complies with the airport land use plan and for the safety zones it's located within.
All right, perfect. And then just to some extent following up on Commissioner Christensen's question, this plot map, the way it is in essence carved up or divided up, is what is in essence proposed as long as the development goes through. Is that correct? And then if the development, say in 2 years, has run out of time, then what would it revert to?
So it would stay as it is today. I believe there's 2 lots. The idea was to create 6 lots. I believe there are 2 today. There's certainly 2 APNs. But yeah, it would just stay as it is today.
Yeah, I'm seeing 2 APNs. I guess my only comment on this is it looks like parcel 5, the way they did it, it is just an extremely unusual arrangement to make that, at least part of this, almost completely unusable, which is kind of what led to my question, but thank you for your input. You want to comment?
Well, if you look where the pointer is, there are some existing residences, and the idea is for those to retain, or they would be retained, and so that parcel is drawn to provide space for that use.
Yeah, it's then beyond that, and it kind of meanders off to the south, and looks like to be big expanse of land that, again, I don't even know what you would do with that land the way that it's designed. So
it does look like it might go around those there's an oak woodland there. It might be to retain those as well. It might be a guess.
If I might comment one thing, one of the reasons was there's like a little pond right there.
Okay.
They were trying to keep that on the hotel side. Also, the house had a life estate at the time for this original development, if I remember correctly. So that was another reason that they were trying to partition that off. But they were also trying to keep the oak grove and the pond over onto the other side of it. That's my recollection. But that, again, that was
all right. I appreciate the input. Yeah, you can see on this that how it's a highly irregular. I've never really seen a more irregular shape. Then I was just curious how in the world did that come to be. But anyway, those are my questions. I knew you did a good job answering them. Thank you.
Okay, Mr. Covarrubias.
So I'm just curious, Katie. They've had a number of extensions. We're on the final extension. Even through COVID, they haven't secured any funding or investors for this. Any update? Are they close? Do you know? My fear is that they're running out of time, and the likelihood, if they haven't secured investors already, what are the real chances that they're going to have this ready to go in 2 years?
I don't have any updates on that. We do have the applicant. Ms. Dyer is on the line, so we can ask that question of her during public comment.
That would be great.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Commissioner Davis, any
questions? No questions, no.
Okay. I have no questions as well, so we will.
I did have a follow-up question, just really quick, if you don't mind. In regards to the water line, did the city run a water line by there, or utilities and the sewer line? Has that all been installed, or has that been engineered? I know that was an issue in when the first applicant started originally.
I believe that water line's installed, right, Dave?
And I guess it leads to my next question. Will that be affected in any way with this if it does expire?
There is a water line there. David Athy, city engineer. So there is a water line that's installed, and that was installed by Paso Robles. So that provides about 3,000 gallons per minute out to that part of Mill Road. And it comes across here and goes across 46. It would be highly unlikely if we didn't have an easement for that water line, because it's accepted and the water department maintains it. So if this subdivision goes away, that easement and that water line would remain.
I think the maps show an existing 20-foot easement that more or less would be under where that road's proposed.
Yeah, that's what I read too. Okay, thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Okay, any other commissioner questions? Okay, hearing none, we will open the public hearing. There is no one in the room apparently to address this item. There may be some callers. If you are a caller, we would ask that you identify yourself at the beginning of your points you'd like to make.
Good evening, Mr. Kogler. I am Karen Steyer, the project applicant for the Destino Hotel project.
Welcome.
I would especially like to thank you. I would especially like to thank Katie Bannister for presenting the report tonight. As you all are well aware, during the past 2 years, businesses and the economy have been adversely affected. COVID is a significant part of the problem, and unfortunately, COVID has not yet been successfully dealt with. Currently, living costs are skyrocketing, inflation rates are making historic highs, and the Federal Reserve is raising interest rates in hope that inflation can be slowed. Financial advisors are predicting an upcoming recession. Unfortunately, the hospitality industry has suffered serious setback, and the Destino Hotel project has not been spared. The criteria financial and lender underwriters use to determine the financial viability of projects has been turned upside down. Uncertainty prevails. A great deal of time and effort and money has been to date expended on the Destino Hotel project, and building the hotels will require much more. Given the unresolved issues with COVID and the economy, investors can't be faulted for not wanting to lose money by taking the next step in the project prematurely. At this time, no investors have been willing to take the project on. It is a good project and ultimately can have significant benefit for the city. It is prudent to recognize that the current economic situation is beyond our control. Conversely, it is unwise to not allow ample time for the adverse circumstances to see a course correction. It is therefore prudent to extend the entitlements for 2 years in the expectation that some of the issues with COVID and the economy will be resolved. I respectfully ask for your approval of my request for a 2-year entitlement time extension for the Destino Hotel project as recommended in your staff reports. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Starr. Are there any comments from anybody else calling in?
Chair. Oh, yep. I was just going to ask.
No, there's no more
Okay.
callers.
We have no more callers. Did you have something you wanted to cover, Isaac?
No, Chair, just to say if there were questions for applicant from the commission, just to confirm we didn't have anyone else on the line speaking before, the commission potentially posed questions to the applicant.
We had that covered. Thank you. Commission, back to us. Discussion points, motion? We'll close the hearing. Yes. Mr. Gibson.
I'm prepared to make a motion. I move to approve Resolution 22-XXX, granting a 2-year time extension for PD 08-002, CUP 08-002, and VTTM 2962 to January 17, 2025, and amending the resolution to make the finding that no subsequent environmental review is necessary because the extension of the project entitlements would not result in any significant environmental impacts not considered in the approved M&D. There is no substantial evidence in the record suggesting any of the criteria set forth in state CEQA guidelines section 15162 is met, and accordingly no subsequent environmental review is necessary.
Thank you, Commissioner Gibson. Is there a second? I'll second. A second from Commissioner Krover-Rubius. Is there any further discussion on this time extension? Hearing none, staff, please call the roll.
Commissioner Gibson?
Aye.
Commissioner Kovarubias?
Aye.
Commissioner Davis?
Aye.
Commissioner Christensen?
Aye.
Chairperson Kogler?
Aye.
Motion passes 5-0.
Okay, thank you very much. All right, we will move on to item H on our agenda, which are discussion items by staff. We have 2 of those this evening. The first of those is shown as number 3, which is code compliance update. Looks like maybe Darcy has this one.
Yes, good evening. Darcy Delgado, Associate Planner. So I'll be giving the presentation on the zoning code, the compliance discussion that has been talked about. I just want to kind of, before I dive into things, make a note to the Planning Commission that there are a couple limitations for tonight, just to keep in mind as I'm going through the discussion item, and then as there's Q&A at the end. One of the things we want to just mention is that the Planning Commission is precluded from discussing very specific code enforcement cases in detail. So we wouldn't want to bring up any specific addresses or locations, because it could affect the due process that person, if there is code enforcement in the future. And then also just want to make another note that a lot of what we're talking about tonight, keep in mind that Planning Commission doesn't necessarily have a lot of action. A lot of the code enforcement or any policy changes would need to come from City Council, but we're looking for input and comments. But just keep it in mind, and we'll figure out kind of what that path forward is once we get all the Q&A. So with that, just wanted to kind of start with what the code enforcement process looks like, and that's a complaint initiated. So complaints are received and then routed to the best department for response. So, that might be planning, community development, building department. Also, we have community services staff, so that's the traditional code enforcement. So it gets routed. We do have some help from community services in terms of outreach. So sometimes, there's something that falls under the zoning code and we're not really getting any teeth in the game. So we, use the code enforcement, and they do help us to, if we need to send letters or make some kind of contact. But generally, they do not respond to most of the zoning code matters unless we really need their help with something. With that said, community development does not have any dedicated enforcement staff. And so as we get complaints, it really just falls on whoever is most familiar with that item, or in some cases, nobody's familiar, and it's just whoever has, ability to take it on. This table just really shows what the current code compliance efforts are, and I wanted to show you community development versus community services. So again, that's code enforcement, and this is not an exhaustive list by any means. I'm sure there's a lot more things that that are part of that could have made the list. So you have community services on the left, community development in the middle, and then on the right, I wanted to show that there is some overlap of who the responsible department is. So in this case, if we look at the second item, noise complaints, there might be noise complaints that are directed towards community services or planning, and sometimes there's some back and forth. But community services, they were looking at nuisance abatement, blight issues. They do receive noise complaints, fence complaints, as does the community development department. So there is some overlap depending on what the specific issue is and where it falls in the municipal code as to what the violation might be. They will also take on any illegal signs. So those are signs that can't be permitted. They're just out, the zoning code wouldn't allow them. Whereas community development, we would take on unpermitted signs. So those would be signs that could be permitted. They just haven't gone through the process yet. They're also looking at complaints that are related to animals. Grading without a permit, that also has some overlap. Again, it just depends on what specific violation in the municipal code that we're talking about. So that's where you'll see some overlap and us trying to figure out, who is the responsible party. They also get complaints about parking. To kind of finish out some of the community development department compliance efforts that we receive, construction related impacts. So, River Oaks 2, grading, dust, we get phone calls and try and steer those and navigate who can respond. Specific plan neighbor inquiries, so people questioning what's going on with Olson, with their development. Again, also some construction related impacts. We do get a lot of short-term rental inquiries, so complaints might not be the best word, but definitely questions related to short-term rentals. That is a huge part of compliance efforts that we're doing. And then, of course, building code violations. So this isn't an exhaustive list, but just this is kind of what the current efforts are at this time. With the planning department specifically, I guess we could say all of community development department, but this list represents the most common complaints that we get. Short-term rentals, again, is probably the number one, just because it is such a heavy topic right now. We do get quite a few complaints that are related to fence height. So as you know, we have, a restriction on the height of a fence in the front yard. And then also if it is in a side or rear yard, maybe they've built over 6 feet, and we deal with those complaints. Of course, we always, without fail, we'll get complaints about somebody building without a permit or work being done without a permit, and then various members of community development might respond to that. Non-conforming uses, so if you have a land use that is not permitted, or somebody has an existing use and they're doing other uses in that on that property that are not allowed, that can be very time consuming to try and steer them in the right direction. And then also RVs, parking in a front yard. It seems kind of like it pales in comparison to some other things, but we do get complaints about RVs parking in a front yard. And a lot of these complaints, they do take a lot of staff time. So it might look like just something, you know, that you can answer a phone call, but a lot of times there is a lot of follow-up. So construction or building without a permit or grading violations, you know, some of these take years to resolve. And so just wanted to kind of share with you all some of the things that are kind of common in our world with regard to compliance. So then just wanted to kind of show the Planning Commission, you know, something that has been taking probably about a quarter of planning staff's time would be the short-term rental permit enforcement. And so we're getting calls about nuisance at short-term rentals, so that might be related to noise or parking. There are a lot of inquiries about if people are operating a short-term rental without a permit, and a lot of follow-up, which leads to, you know, the planner, staff, or whoever that might be, you know, doing some research and trying to track down, you know, what exactly is going on. We do have host compliance, which is they do a lot, and Lori and Katie might help fill in the gaps if there are questions specific to short-term rentals. But the point is, there is a lot of follow-up with the short-term rental permit enforcement, and that does take, I would say, about a quarter of staff's time right now. So sign code enforcement has been one of the more challenging code enforcement. It's a moving target, and it does require long-term monitoring. So we did a sign sweep of illegal signs, I would say 6 years ago, and it requires a lot of time because you're driving around and it's, you know, you're trying to capture the whole city, not just any one part to, you know, be equal in that. So sign code enforcement is very time consuming and it's challenging. One of the challenges is that with the enforcement is you might create some kind of negative impression of the business community and then city staff. You know, if they put up an illegal sign or an unpermitted sign, depending on what the situation is, and treating all people equally, you might have, you know, be nitpicking a sign that would just, you know, fly through DRC, but they didn't go through the process. And, you know, versus somebody who just, you know, needs to take their sign down and go through the process the right way. But it's a complicated, awkward kind of, you know, thing to do. But we understand that there are areas for improvement. I think that it would be really good to hear from the Planning Commission on, you know, if the sign code enforcement, if there's ways that we could relook at it. There are, as mentioned, two types of sign enforcement. So on that slide that had the table, we have unpermitted signs versus illegal signs. So we operate under the zoning code, so Title 21, so we can respond to unpermitted signs. So that would be a sign that could be permitted, they just haven't gone through the process. But we do not have the ability to enforce illegal signs, and so that would fall under code enforcement. And I believe their provisions are in Title 1 of the municipal code. So the thing to consider tonight is there might be some things that the Planning Commission might be interested in, but it might fall out of our purview. It might not be something that we can, it's not in Title 21, it's not in the zoning code, so it might not be something that we can necessarily change, for instance, with the zoning code update. So just to kind of summarize everything, I think the big question tonight is what does the Planning Commission see as the priorities for code compliance? So, you know, there's a lot that we're working on, and it does seem that there are some things that, you know, maybe the Commission might be interested in. It seemed that signs was one of the things that the Commission wanted to talk about, so we're prepared to dive into that. And we have we're able to take notes, but I think this is a great time to kind of, you know, begin the discussion. And then we do have Isaac on the line. Isaac, I don't know if I missed anything that you wanted to highlight, but otherwise I'm happy to collectively answer questions for the Planning Commission.
That sounds great, Darcy. Yeah, I think I would just add, I thought you explained it well. Obviously, to Darcy's point, code enforcement is handled outside of the zoning code. And so it does fall broadly outside of Planning Commission's purview. So I know the department wanted to, and I know it comes up for the commissioners often with projects or requests to understand better sort of the pulse of what's going on in the community with and trying to anticipate or mitigate potential code issues that may arise with specific projects. But I just want to know that, yeah, to Darcy's point, it is broadly outside of the Planning Commission's purview, and it would be the City Council that would need to sort of initiate any formal change in policy or direct staff resources towards specific code items. And so I think to Darcy's point in the question on the screen is sort of what the Planning Commission sees as priorities more generally. And as Darcy mentioned, there will be a zoning code update in which the Planning Commission will be heavily involved. And so there are opportunities within the zoning code to try to address some of those concerns, and again, to approach sort of code from a different angle and to mitigate some of those issues within the confines of planning and zoning authority.
Okay, thank you. Commissioners, comments, questions? Let's start with Commissioner Covarrubias.
First off, I don't envy the staff at all for having to deal with this on a regular basis. Holy cow. Question, so the follow-up I know is a tough part of all of this. What is the process? Let's say you get a call on a sign, somebody's complaining about a sign being either unpermitted or illegal or whatever the case is. What's the process?
And the process could vary depending on what it is we're talking about, especially if you can see it from the public right of way, or if it's, something that we can't see from the public right of way. But, investigating it, verifying it, a complaint. And in this case, if it was a sign, probably reaching out with a letter, or if it's somebody that just got a business license. Oh, by the way, your sign, you have to go to DRC. It kind of depends on the situation. So, but we do make contact once a complaint is initiated to correct it. Or that is if we verify that they have it needs some code compliance. And the follow-up could be, several letters before we have to then invite, try and get code enforcement staff to help us out. In the more extreme cases, we get our city attorney involved, and this is where you can see things turning into years. So I would say a sign is less likely to be one of those, but like a grading violation, that could take years to solve.
So is there a fine process implemented with all of this? If they're not responsive, are we able to, or is the city able to start fining the individual?
So we do have the ability to fine. It hasn't really been our practice depending on the violation. I think the more extreme it gets, where we do recoup, the cost that it has incurred for city staff. So there is the ability to make a citation, and that's again where we would ask code enforcement to step in and help us if that's needed. But a sign, for instance, it might be just communication level and just really working with them. Again, it's the awkward, you don't want to create this negative impression and here's a fine if you don't correct it. So I think Paso Robles has this really good rapport with the residents and with the business community. So it hasn't, with signs, it hasn't gotten to the point, or even fences. We definitely we want to solve the problem, and we want everyone to reach a compromise and move on, especially if it is, we're complaint driven. So these are complaints that are being elevated to our attention, but we're not, driving around looking for it. So, there is a good relationship, but then certainly if, there are projects that warrant fines, and, I think even still we have a good relationship with those, with those violators, just trying to move things forward.
Yeah, I think the challenge that you have is nobody wants to be the bad person, right? Nobody, as a city, we want to be proactive, of course, and it sounds like you guys are, but unfortunately, sometimes to get the point across, money talks. Sometimes it's I'm not saying it's a great thing, but, when people have to start pulling money out of their pocket to remedy a situation, I find at least that they tend to be a little bit more responsive. They may get irritated a little bit, but if you make enough effort and there's still no result, I don't know what other choice you have. Because one of the things we do have in our city is a lot of inconsistencies, especially with our signs. All you got to do is drive around and you can tell almost which ones are either illegal or possibly good chance not permitted. And I think that's one of the problems we have. And we have a lot of charm in the city, but one of the things that's not very consistent is the signs. I mean, it just is what it is. So how do we remedy that? That's I don't envy you guys for that. So anyways, that's enough for now. I'll ask some other questions later.
Mr. Davis.
I would like to echo what Commissioner Covarrubias mentioned. This is not fun. I don't envy you when you have to go out. You know, it's just not fun. When I think about priorities, I guess kind of a general statement would be to see consistency, that we're reacting similarly to complaints, and clarity on what the rules are and how they're communicated to the person who's violating. So there's some very general things. My next question, Darcy, comment, is kind of staffing oriented, so I know that's not really my purview here, but if it's a community development issue, something in a residential areas, some commercial trucks parking in a cul-de-sac or something, it's when you say you don't have an enforcement officer, then it goes over to code enforcement. What is the profile? Is that a police officer? Or could you profile who community development hands it off to if it's not a community development staff person?
Right. And again, it probably depends on the violation. So there are non-sworn officers that could respond. I mean, but even noise complaints, there are sworn officers that respond to incidents, or if there's something that's happening that is not during our staff hours. Again, police can go check it out, or what have you. We do have, building official, if there's something going on that, we have a permit for and we need to check it out. If it doesn't quite seem like it's community development, so sometimes it's not just a planner that might be looking into something, but it might be the building department or engineering department will check it out if we have an active permit. What's the complaint that we're getting? And because not to say that the planners don't have any teeth, but you have somebody who's coming out who's a little
with a badge
official. Yeah, they have the hat with the logo and everything. So they usually can get a response. And again, with that good relationship, hey, this is an issue. Can you please resolve it? It's usually how it goes. But just because we don't have dedicated enforcement staff doesn't mean that we don't have community development staff who respond to things. It's just, I guess if it didn't get resolved, we would probably look to somebody who could, that has a little bit more teeth.
And could you restate again how much of staff time is dedicated to enforcement? And could you restate that?
I don't have an exact number because as a department, as a community development department, there are various roles that everybody would play, but just with planning staff, which we field a lot of, what was on that list. Right now, short-term rentals is a lot, I would say about a quarter of our time. So you could easily have one, so there's 4 planners, you could have one staff member probably doing full-time just short-term rentals, not including all the other enforcement that we have. But there's a lot of enforcement happening. Again, some of these are, years, and some of them are quicker matters. But even a fence violation could be, several months to get the materials needed to go to DRC, and, a lot of communication, a lot of follow-up. Hopefully that answers some of your questions.
And I think it comes down to some staffing issues, and that's more of a city council decision, I'm presuming. Do other cities have dedicated enforcement officers?
I'm not sure. I'm wondering if some of the other specific, community development has more like code enforcement driven position. It would be interesting to, I'm not aware, but it would be interesting to find that out. If for instance, if we had a planner who just did, follow-up enforcement, I don't know if that's a common role that other jurisdictions have.
Yeah.
Good evening, Lori Wilson, Assistant Planner. Katie and I just had a conversation with the City of Pismo Beach yesterday with their planning manager, and we talked about short-term rentals and a little bit of their enforcement process. And they were explaining they have a code enforcement type role under community development. I'm sure they handle a broad range of things, but specifically for short-term rentals, they are going out and doing inspections on the short-term rentals and making sure that they're actual, primary residences, and getting really involved in each one of them. So I would assume there's other cities that have, and I think I've heard of others too, that have an enforcement officer under community development that would really help with a broad range of these matters that we do.
Yeah, I know I've asked a lot of questions. I'm going to let my fellow commissioners jump in there, sorry. But thank you very much.
Mr. Christensen.
I don't really have too much that's not been covered already. I think it's obviously going to be an evolving issue for a growing city with, especially with the new development going into place. I guess the one question I had was if you were to give me a sense of what's a first contact? Is it a letter? Is it a phone call? Is it somebody actually stopping by? What's the first contact usually say? And you could pick any type of, issue.
Yeah. I would say a phone call or an email, something a little, friendly. Hey, we're not looking to send that nasty letter, right off the bat. So it's usually some other form of communication. It depends on also if we're familiar with the person. Sometimes we have to chase down and look for that phone number. Something as simple as a sign can take some time, actually, especially if you have outdated information on a business license, the phone number's changed, the address has changed. So it might be a phone call that you're thinking, and then because you can't get a hold of the person,
right,
you're resorting to a certified letter in the mail.
Yeah,
but
I would imagine there's quite a bit of that research that takes place. The STRs are one thing because to get a license, unless it's obviously not in the program, right, legitimately, having the contact information is probably a large part of that battle, even if it's a sign that's not approved. Finding out who actually is in charge of that. Mm-hmm. Okay, I think that's interesting. It makes sense that would be the easiest way to handle that, but I could see how the STRs are a larger priority, probably of time going into this. I can't imagine that you have you're weighed down by fence complaints, but I would imagine it's probably a lot of the STRs and then signs. So I would think a priority would be maybe we address, if that's the largest bulk of your time issue, how can we streamline that,
And so just to be clear, we don't get very many sign complaints. So I think we've had one recently.
Oh, okay.
We do not get sign complaints from the public.
Right.
It's not common.
It's not common for the public to complain about a sign. Right. Interesting. Okay. So then you would say probably the bulk of your time is probably the STRs.
STRs, grading without a permit. There's, but yeah, STRs right now, if you were to look at, having one staff person just spend almost, 40 hours a week,
Sure.
Right. And they're going through a renewal process right now. So there's kind of some time spent to that, but they are a big chunk. And, it's been kind of made a priority, I think, from city council to operate this, the short-term rental permit.
The only thing that I guess would kind of throw out there is, on some of these other, like, for example, grading without a permit, would it behoove the city to spend a little bit of marketing for any of these issues and public announcement type situations where we're kind of promoting it? For example, what dictates, an illegal grading? How much dirt can I move in my yard? I'm talking about the simplicity of it. Fisher Price simple, getting the basic information, maybe that might be something that would kind of continue to put knowledge in people's heads and reminders. I don't know if that would be effective for the STRs as well, but just a thought maybe to help the public be aware of that more and more so it's in their mind. So, all right, that's it for me.
Mr. Gibson.
I'd like to start off by having a little bit better understanding on the short-term rentals. I know we've had some of our meetings where we've discussed this and been made aware that there's a hotline, I guess you would call it, hotline for the SDRs. So just from the process, what got me thinking is, so you have a hotline, somebody calls the hotline, and then what happens?
Lori Wilson, again, assistant planner. So if somebody calls the hotline, it triggers a call to the agent or the owner of the permit.
By who?
By a company that we contract with called Granicus.
Okay.
Or other host compliance is what they're more well known.
And then at what point does anybody from the city get involved?
So we get a copy, or email gets sent to the city for every single call that comes into the hotline, and it includes a recording of the call. And then we know that the automated call, we can see the notes too, that the automated call went out to the owner or agent. And then that owner or agent is responsible for letting the city know, either by emailing us directly or calling back the hotline is what we suggest that they do. how it was resolved. So then I get another email saying the owner has called, they took care of the parking situation. So I look at those as well as Katie, and if I see a call come in, a complaint, and then I don't see a follow-up one, that's when I get involved. If I do see a follow-up one that's come through within 30 minutes and they've noted how it was addressed, I let it go. It's been recorded. They took care of it in a timely manner. It's fine. But it's those ones that don't get addressed within the 30 minutes that they get a strike on their permit.
Okay, so that would be, it sounds like that, if I'm understanding what you're saying, Lori, is that they call the hotline then during business hours. What happens is if they call, it's obviously like after hours or on the weekend. And then the process, it would be somewhat the same, I guess, the first part of it anyway. This third-party company reaches out, and then on Monday morning, then you start the follow-up process?
Right. So basically the whole point of the hotline is for the after hours calls when we're not available. Right. So unless it's an emergency and they need to call the police. I
was just trying to understand the 30-minute comment that you made.
They're supposed to take care of it if in 30 minutes. If somebody's calling to complain though, and sometimes they will call again if it hasn't been taken care of. And then essentially, they should be calling the police or somebody to come if the hotline's not addressing it. And then, yes, Monday morning I come in and see that we had 5 calls and nobody addressed it. And I do call out to the owner or agent just to follow up and see what happened. And then they also get a strike on their permit.
So if it's after hours or, which would include the weekend, then it sounds like the enforcement basically falls onto the police department?
The owner would be the primary number one person to enforce it, and then it would be the police is kind of how we would hope that would go for things like parking or, that aren't emergency
or noise
situations.
Or anything else?
Yes.
Okay. All right. Okay, thanks. So I'm going to move on. I have a couple more questions. So you had mentioned the illegal versus unpermitted sign. So illegal would be what, because of the size or the materials, or could you kind of just to differentiate between what is illegal versus unpermitted? I know what unpermitted is, but what makes it illegal?
Yeah, so we have signs that in our zoning code, they're just not permitted at all. We would call them illegal signs. So feather flag signs or like the blow up guy signs, those can never be permitted. Whereas maybe a unpermitted sign it hasn't gone through the process. It could meet the criteria. Maybe it's too big and we don't know that yet because we haven't gone through the process, but it's a permanent wall mounted sign versus a feather flag sign. So that would be the difference.
Okay. All right. Thank you. 2 more comments or questions. So what is the process for projects that have been approved but are not making reasonable progress?
Okay, do you want to answer? I know you might have some more recent knowledge.
Because we have some of those.
I haven't specifically worked on one, so I don't want to, throw something out there.
I'm just wondering, what the process is for that.
It's definitely a challenge. So at that point, it would be the building department would be responding. Once a building permit is issued, they have to call for an inspection every 180 days. And when we're not seeing inspections happening, the building inspectors will give a call, try to find out what's going on. We obviously have a project on the north end of Spring that has come to, I'm not seeing progress there again. And it's probably time for city staff to follow up. It is definitely a challenge. That is a hard one. Warren, I don't know if you have any additional comments because that's a challenge.
I gather it's a challenge. No, that would be one area that I think that if there's not some sort of process, I've started to see some of this, especially certain economic times, I guess, with interest rates going up or it's hard finding labor. I'm not sure what the issues are. And then you start seeing projects deteriorate and be eyesores. I just would think that should be something in terms of code compliance that somehow we've got to figure that out, because I think it's going to start happening more and more. Right? Okay, last thing. There's more of a comment, but I appreciate any comment back. So I was talking with somebody recently, and they were shocked that they have to have a permit or follow any rules towards building a fence. And the fence they're describing, I said, I guarantee you I'm not a code enforcement person. That's absolutely illegal. They blew up. So clearly the public is not aware that they have to get some sort of permission or follow any sort of rules, but this fence was in excess of 10 feet tall and was going to be, I said,
Commissioner, just to interject, we need to avoid talking about specific instances.
Yeah, I'm not going to give address or specific. I'm just giving the idea that it had to do with the size and the scope of the fence. I said, you really need to go talk to somebody. Okay. How does the public know, or how is the public educated on things like this, that there are any sort of rules towards fences or things like that?
Well, so, the public can contact city staff, come in city hall, email, phone call to ask, if their fence needs a permit, where it's allowed to go. And so unless they're finding it on their own and proactive and looking, what the zoning code says about fences. But if, somebody who chooses not to, they can simply call us. But we don't have any, fences are a dime a dozen, right? So we don't have any other way to let people know until after we get a complaint, if there is a violation, and then go through that process. Is there a violation kind of thing?
All right. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Gibson. A few questions, picking up on one of Commissioner Gibson's point. On the building projects that seem to be kind of languishing, is there a building inspection every 6 months on those? Does the inspector actually go out on premise every 6 months, even though there may be nothing happening?
I want to say that, we would try to, if it falls off the radar, and then we kind of get the complaints, that's when we relook at, there's a lot of projects going on. We relook at the project, see, oh man, they haven't had an inspection in a certain amount of time. I think that if it got elevated to it got a certain degree of attention because it had a history, we probably would then make it more proactive to make sure that we're meeting, every 6 months doing an inspection. But I think it would depend on the situation. If it was a one-off, it's probably not a routine thing, because as we all know, there's a lot going on and things can fall off our radar.
Okay, thank you. So you mentioned illegal flags, and amusingly, from my perspective, at least, you identify feather flags and then these bouncing Gumby-esque kind of cactuses or whatever they might be. You enforced largely on a complaint basis, but if you drive past one of those, what do you do?
So the illegal signs, that is not something that the community development department responds to. So usually that would go to code enforcement, because we don't have the ability to pick up a sign and then take it somewhere. So it's a little unclear if, because there hasn't been that direction from city council to remove illegal signs. So I think, and it's not, specific to Title 21. So right now we just drive by them and keep driving.
Really? Okay. It's helpful to know. So you started your presentation talking about when we receive a complaint. It may go here, it may go there. And if I'd known the depth of this discussion, I probably would have paid more attention to the website. But if I'm a resident and I got a complaint about a fence or a grading plan or parking or whatever, if I go to the website, does it say, this is whom I contact when I have a complaint? Complaints received by whom?
You want to answer?
On the, Marcy Reynoso, there is a section on the city's website when you go to the main page, so prcity.com. Across the top, there are a few different little badges, and one of them is to make a complaint. And so we have a new system now where we field those complaints, and they come in and they go to the right department, and then we go from there. So we'll track them online there and be able to respond to them.
Okay, good. Thank you. That's good. So kind of along that line, complaints, STR complaints. I was under the impression the hotline was a 24-hour hotline. What I think I'm hearing is, at least maybe by use, it's more during off hours. And during the day, you guys field calls. This is a question, I guess, that otherwise should be going to the hotline. Does that happen?
Lori Wilson, again, assistant planner. It is a 24-hour hotline, so somebody could call it at any time. And we actually have gotten calls at 10 in the morning for noise complaints on it. But they could call us as well, so it's just an option they have, but it's 24 hours.
Okay.
What, Lori, the thing that takes more of Lori and my time is actually the permits that are or the rentals operating without a permit, following up and trying to get those to stop operating. That actually is much more time consuming than the nuisance calls. That takes up significantly more. The nuisance calls, they seem to self-resolve pretty quickly, but it's those operating without a permit that are taking more time.
Okay. because a 25% draw on your time is hugely significant. And at least with the case of STRs, I presume there is hopefully a matching revenue source coming from permits and things that covers those staff costs, or at least to the degree that we can under law. Just an editorial comment. I hope that works out that way. I fully understand that code compliance is outside of the purview of this group. However, as you probably can tell, we're sensitive to this because we're in the middle of it a lot. There was a comment offered earlier tonight that, you know, signs, yeah, they may not be permitted yet, but they're probably something the DRC might allow anyway. I was on the DRC Monday, and we almost didn't allow in the configuration a sign that staff had approved or recommended approval. Signs seem to be one of those things that the DRC really rolls its sleeves up from time to time, and I think look at it pretty critically. So I would caution against an assumption that let's not bring that one to light right now because the DRC would probably approve that anyway. I would hate to be one to try to predict what the DRC is going to do each and every time. So yes, indeed, it's outside of our purview, but we are passing judgment on signs with DRC. We are passing judgment on signs before this group on larger projects when they come before us. So, you know, yes, we don't enact the rules, but we're in the middle of helping interpret those rules. So it probably builds a little frustration sometimes on our side of the table. I think that's pretty much all I've got. This has been helpful. I can tell you from my personal experience in other states, some cities do have code compliance staff within community development, but it's communities that usually are larger and have resources to do that kind of thing. It's probably not our size city, customarily. That it's a great thing to have if you can do it. I fully understand that the city wants to be welcoming and friendly to all residents and business people. We balance that against a set of rules we all operate. And you know, I don't think just because someone may be a little bit upset with the city because we interpreted and applied a rule that we necessarily shy away from it. So again, we don't do that as a planning commission, but others in the city do. And I think there's an element sometimes of those that are involved in making decisions on ordinances and things that, well, you know, if we're not going to enforce it, why are we going to enact it? And so I think there are things on the books that we are interested in seeing have some level of appropriate enforcement, understanding all of the constraints and problems with it. I would commend, as I think we all would, the job you guys do in balancing all of those interests. It's a whole lot to do. And I think you're doing a job. I think that's all my questions at the moment. Others that have come up by other commissioners? None? Okay. Thank you for bringing this forward. It's informative, I think, for us, and it's a good reminder for us to know what all of our responsibilities are in all of this and what limitations and sometimes we have.
Thank you. Thank you.
And Chair, it is, the discussion items are not public hearings and weren't noticed as such, so we don't have to take public input, but I think just because we're still in the hybrid scenario, Marcy, I did want to just check if anyone was on the line that we think may speak on either of the discussion items, even if not mandated to take public comment.
No, there are no callers.
Okay, great.
Thank you, Isaac, for that reminder, because I actually had intended to see if there were any callers, so I will do that on the next one. Okay, speaking of the next one, must be David Athey, City Engineer time. Transportation Improvement Update.
Yes. It's a double push. Good evening, Chairman Kogler, Planning Commissioners. David Athey. I'm here tonight to talk about transportation. I want this to be more of a conversation rather than me telling you what's going on. I'd like to basically, I've heard a lot in the near past, folks complaining that the city is not doing anything about traffic. And nothing could be further from the truth. We've got a lot of things cooking right now. I think a lot of good news. So you're my guinea pigs tonight. This is my first presentation I've put together, and really I want this presentation to serve as a resource for you. So when folks, if they do, I'm guessing they do, periodically ask you about what's going on with traffic, and you're approving all these projects and nothing's going on, and traffic's getting worse. It's Armageddon. The city's just sitting back doing nothing. I think this will provide you a lot of good information. It's just the tip of the iceberg. I can't get into every nuance and every little detail about transportation and what we're doing in the city. But overall, I think it's good news. Is it the best news? No, we could always improve, and that's what we strive to do every day. So I just want to give you a little an overview of, how do we plan transportation in the city? How are we looking forward into the future? How are we looking at the city in terms of going to build out? So we'll be talking about the circulation element and the plans that support the circulation element. I want to talk a little bit about project funding. There's a lot of good news on that right now, especially from the public side of funding and then the private side of funding, because really it all works together in the city. And I want to talk about some projects that are going on, both conceptual, in design, and projects that are in construction. So I'll give you some examples of that, and then at the end, I know I'll forget something in this presentation, so happy to answer any questions. If you see something as we're going through this, please feel free to let me know. So the mainstay of our transportation system is the circulation element. It's one of the chapters of the general plan. It's very important. It basically lays out the plan for transportation in the city. And as we get these projects in, we look at the circulation element and see how they comply and how we have to implement different requirements for these projects. So the element contains goals, policies, and action items. And so, for instance, the goal would be a well-maintained and designed and planned transportation system that's multimodal and serves all citizens, not just drivers, but peds and bicyclists also. With that, we would have a policy. Our policy is to keep the circulation element updated and to keep our plan updated. And the action item would be to look at our master plan map that's shown on the screen now. And to look at the different projects that are needed, not for like every little neighborhood, but projects that are needed for the whole city's circulation system. We're talking the bigger picture items. So this map on the screen, there's little blue dots with a black dot in the center. Those would be intersection improvements. The one that looks like the BMW signal on Highway 46 East, right there. Is the Union Road overpass. We also have interchange improvements at the southern end of the city on 101 that we're working with Caltrans and our other project partners on. And we have all the other signals and roundabouts and different amenities that we're looking at. So what are the supporting plans I talked about? So you can think of the circulation element like the top of the chair, like what we sit on, right? And then it's supported by different plans that come out of the circulation element, some of those action items. And like a big one is the bike and ped plan. This was adopted by the city council in 2018. It lays out our plans and our goals for the city, our bicycle transportation plan, our pedestrian bicycle pedestrian plan, and I'll have an example here tonight of one of the projects actually two of the projects that came out of this PED plan and are now being implemented in the city. On top of that, we have a local roadway safety plan that was just adopted by City Council. This looks at high accident rate intersections and corridors and gives us ideas for things to improve. And we've recently applied for a grant using this plan. Traffic studies, so individual traffic studies. When these big projects come in, like the Olson South Chandler Ranch, we perform a traffic study to see what their impacts are, both on the local area around the project and then more regionally, speaking in the city regionally, what are those impacts? And, different the circulation element and the, and these traffic plans are looked at together to make sure that we're picking out the right improvements. Specific plans. So when we dive into a specific plan, we're looking at, what are the roads that are needed for this area? So this one is the Venado plan. We have local streets. We have the extension of Sherwood Road. We have, it lays out, the specific plan lays out the width of the roads, how many intersections, all those kind of things that support the circulation element goals. We also have corridor plans, so specific plans for corridors. This one is for the Crescent Road Complete Streets plan. That project's going to construction next year. So that's been funded, and that's what's really important. I hear a lot sometimes folks say, and sometimes maybe rightly so, that, oh, you guys just study things and produce a plan and pay a consultant, and nothing ever happens. Well, that could actually never be farther from the truth in Paso Robles. We have the Crescent Corridor Plan. We just got an extra $3 million for that. We're going to build the Rolling Hills roundabout, and then also extend that project out to Niblick Road on Creston. And then we also recently were awarded a grant for $13.8 million for the Niblick Road Corridor Plan, which is going to extend the Class 1 bike and ped path from basically Spring Street to Crescent Road. So these plans are huge, and we really need these supporting plans and that support the circulation element. It's kind of like this like the stool, at the top of the stool and the legs. They all support each other. It's not really a plan, but system optimization. This is where I do a lot of work around the city. I get complaints, I get requests for traffic, improvements and things here and there. Like I need a stop sign, or why can't we have a right turn lane at First Street? Turning onto the freeway, is there not enough room? So we look at that. This is a project that came out of that kind of thing. There was a lot of complaints about crossing the street at 13th and Park. And that's because it's dark and there's a lot more ped traffic now. The city's changed, right? We're getting a lot of that pedestrian level interest downtown. So we have to react to that by doing projects that, enhance the intersections for pedestrian traffic. So now I want to break into a little bit about spending. Our money comes from the general fund. Everybody knows that. Sales tax revenue, we've passed 2 different sales tax, half-cent and 1-cent sales tax generator. Recently, the voters were very generous and approved the transit occupancy tax increase, and that money will be used for, various neighborhood improvements and improvements to quality of life items in the city. Also, we get a lot of money from grants. As I mentioned before, we got $13.8 million recently. We've got $750,000 recently for improvements at Flamson Middle School for safe routes to school, and we also got another $350,000 grant to do Class 1 path design along North River Road. So we get a lot of grants, and we're continually looking for grants because these are great ways to fill in our transportation system. And finally, we have impact fees, right? This is everybody. The impact fees are a way that everybody pays their fair share for the system, and I'm going to break into that in a second. So I looked at our budget this year. We have the CO stands for carryover. So this is money that was already budgeted in the last couple of years. Those are for projects that are ongoing that the Public Works Department is managing and putting together. So that money is still there in the budget. Year 1, so right now we're in year 1 of the current budget, and the city council has earmarked $33 million for various projects. That includes the grant projects that we're going to get. So it includes all the different funding avenues, but that's money, that's real money that's going to be spent on our transportation system. And then in year 2, that number bumps up to $42 million. With in aggregate, just in the last couple of years, we're going to spend upwards of $92 million. Now, are we going to expend exactly $92 million? No, but that's what we're anticipating based on the grants we've applied for and received, and the money that the city council has approved for different projects around the city. Now I want to talk a little bit about impact fees, because I'm building up to kind of like what we're doing right now and in the future, and I just want to give everybody kind of the background on it. Another way we pay for projects is the AB 1600 list, and this is directly tied to the circulation element. So in order to fund all those projects and collect fees from development, we have to have, by law, AB 1600, a list of projects that are used to develop cost estimates that are developed that will be used to develop the fair share cost for the city's share, which is us, all the citizens, and then new development share. So they're buying into the system, and we're paying for our use also. So it's a way to be fair so that everybody has set costs for their development. So this is our list. Quite a few projects. There's 3 different fee areas, and then there's a citywide circulation fee. This is a really small. I can provide this to you if you like. It's in our circulation element and part of our AB 1600 fee study that was approved by council. But we have to list these out, and the different columns will show you the facility cost to the city. That's the overall cost. That's the first column. There's the city's share, and then there's development share. And we have these for 3 different fee areas in the city. So A, B, and C. A is the least expensive fee area. It's part of the city that's really kind of built out more. And then B has less development, so its fees are a little higher. And then C is the highest cost area because it needs the most infrastructure and is the least built out of the city. So we use the AB 1600 list. We come up with the project costs. Then we come up with development share. Unless, for fee area C, that's the blue column. It's about 36%. Their share is 36% of the transportation costs for all those backbone, what we call backbone infrastructure in the city. So this fee here is then different land uses are assigned different amounts of their responsibility, right? So there's so much is assigned to commercial, so much to residential, and so much of that is assigned to RV parks and campgrounds, right? And so then a fee based on that split is worked up. And so this is how when we have like a house that comes in fee area C, single family residence, its total transportation impact fee, it's a lump sum, it's $11,800 plus some change, right? So that's the fee that they would pay. Other uses pay by the square foot, like warehousing and those kind of things. So this is meant to be fair to the applicant and fair to the existing citizens, so everybody's paying their fair share as we go along. Now I want to get into that's how we pay for it, like how we get to this point, how we pay for it, all the different projects. Now we have projects in design. As you can see on the screen, everything in red has something to do with design. So at the bottom of the screen, we have the South Vine Street realignment. That's currently in design. We have the Creston Road Corridor project, which is the long red line in the middle. And then we have other various projects throughout the city. And some of these are in design by private development. For instance, Veneto is working on the 13th Street signals and signal upgrades there. So these are all the different projects, and I'll get into some specific examples. I just wanted to give you a flavor that there is something going on. There's a lot of stuff going on, actually, even though sometimes it doesn't appear like it. We also have projects under construction. This is only the big projects. Like we always have paving projects. We have ADA ramps, corner ramps, and things like that Public Works works on. But these are the big ones. And the main one is you probably have all seen, and I'll show you a picture in a second, is the Union Road roundabout. The good news there, it's ahead of schedule and looks like it's going to come in, be, depending on the rain, either on schedule or maybe a little early. That would be nice, I think, for everybody. We also have Ardmore Road, which is that little line, and then also this piece up here is part of Track 3069. They're putting in a roundabout at Wisteria and developing a little portion of New Airport Road, which will connect eventually to the airport. So that's all part of our transportation system. We also have grant projects. So the great news, very happy that the Niblick Road Corridor project's funded. We got funding for the roundabout at Rolling Hills, and we have funding, as I mentioned before, for the Flamson Middle School Safe Routes to School project. And we also have some pending grant applications. So we've applied a TCEP grant for the Union Road overpass. That's the Transportation Trade Corridor grant from the state. And we also, these little green lines and blue dots that you see on the screen are a safety upgrade project. We applied for the Highway Safety Improvement Program, and we get to hear, I think it's this month or maybe early next month if we get awarded that grant. But that's a bunch of signal upgrades, signal enhancements. For instance, it's hard to tell, but those bulbs, we call them the ball on a signal. So those are balls. And some of those are actually 8 inches, which is too small. We like them to be a foot diameter. So those things are big. When you get up close to a signal, they're really big. They look kind of smaller far away. So these projects shown in blue dots, looking, well, there you go. The projects shown in blue dots here are all signal upgrades. So those were all identified as part of the local roadway safety plan, right? So those plans that support the general plan transportation element. So little examples: Union Road overpass. So this is going towards design. We're currently working on the environmental. This is moving forward. We also have the Wero Bridge. This is in design right now and moving towards filing that design, and includes a roundabout. This is a nice little diagram of what, close to what it will look like. We have the 13th Street signals. This is being taken on by the Veneto specific plan. This will be signal enhancements at Riverside and Paso Robles and River Road and Creston Road. And finally, one we don't talk about a lot, but has been in progress for quite a while, is replacing the old bridge over the railroad. We're actually widening that out. Right, as you can see here, this is the A&W Kentucky Fried Chicken. The fair is behind us as we look at this. So this will include new sidewalks, bike lanes, and turn lanes, and really be a huge improvement to this area, this part of town. That's moving closer to construction too. Projects under construction, the Union Road Roundabout. So here's a nice little overview that the Public Works Department gave me. It's actually farther along than this now. There's quite a few curbs that have been installed. So this project is really taking shape nicely. And again, funded grant projects, the Flamson Safe Routes to School project. This is the schematic design, kind of a cartoon of what was planned to be done there. This is, if you look up on the screen, this is Oak Street. So new bulb outs on Oak Street, shortening this path of travel. One thing that always concerns me is little kids in crosswalks. And I stood right on the corner right here one day and watched, there was a big truck parked right here in this corner, and I watched 2 little kids, because they built the new elementary school here. It's not the school's fault, but I mean, now it has little kids going to this campus. I stood and watched while there was a truck coming down from the west. And luckily, the gentleman saw these 2 kids there, or they wouldn't have stood a chance because they couldn't see around the big truck. And so this project is meant to get these peds out beyond the parked cars. That's the number one thing we want to do. Get the kids out here, have them be visible. The school district's been doing a good job of using crossing guards to get kids across. We're also enhancing the RFBs, rapid flashing beacons that are there. You know, they're not going to be in the ground anymore. They're going to be on these really bright poles. There'll also be one in the median here in the middle, and then one on this little median right here in the middle. It also includes buffered bike lanes, a new turn lane onto a new right turn lane right here on the Vine Street, some signal upgrades. So some great things here at this school to make things a lot safer, enhance traffic operations because the signal upgrades, and really, you know, just really make this as best as we can for the kids that use this this corridor. The next one is, as I talked about, this is a schematic of the Niblick Complete Streets Corridor project. It's going to include this nice Class 1 path here. So the bike lane, the Class 2 bike lane will be incorporated into a Class 1, which means separated from the road. So riders going westbound will be using that. It'll also establish uniform lane widths on the bridge. And this will extend out to Crescent Road. So really a great amenity to get children out of cars so their parents can let them ride their bike on a safe path to school, separated from traffic, which is the number one thing I hear complaints about from parents, right? They don't want their kids riding on the street, and I don't blame them. I mean, Niblick Road has a lot of traffic, and it's sometimes higher speeds than it should be. So this is going to be a great amenity for this road. Next thing I want to talk about is, you know, you may or may not know, we got a grant for $350,000 to design the bike path along North River Road. This is going to connect. This is going to connect Union to River Oaks Drive. So it's going to be a great connection for those neighborhoods, and the hotel, Allegretto, and the Cuesta College campus is going to be a nice connection all the way down into the downtown. So this will complete the next section of the ring path around the city. Pending grants, talked about that. I don't really have anything to show you here other than I'm very excited about it because it's, you know, something I always like to do is apply for grants because it's not free money because we all pay taxes for it, but let's bring the money back to Paso and improve our city. We also have other maintenance projects like I talked about, citywide paving, ADA ramps, sidewalk infill, very important projects. CDBG, which I think you guys have seen, the council or the planning commission has seen those type of projects before. Traffic signal timing, we have a project where we're going to upgrade the signals on Niblick Road and do some timing and some other improvements there. Drainage improvements, which are always needed on the west side of town. So with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions. I told you this is a conversation, not a...
Thank you, Mr. Ethy. Well done. Commission discussion questions. Let's start in the middle and work our way out. Let's start with Commissioner Davis.
Picture Dave. One question that was going through my mind. I mean, I hear DETIS. Oh, there you are. Okay. I hear DETIS give timeline updates on KPRL, but what kind of community outreach do you have in terms of letting the community know that this is on, you know, this is what we're planning? I mean, what kind of information pieces get disseminated?
Well, certainly DETIS and Frida do a great job of getting the projects out for Parks and Public Works. You know, but they're really busy, and we don't do a lot. I think somebody mentioned, one of the commissioners mentioned earlier, like what kind of education do we do about illegal grading or how much you can grade? Right. We don't do a lot of that. You know, staff is, as the planners were noting earlier, we're maxed out. We're running at full gas, so to speak. And, but that's what this presentation is all about. I'm starting with you to get the word out, and then I'm going to move on to, you know, as time permits, service organizations and the web, and, you know, get this clean up this presentation, tighten it up. If you have any suggestions, you can let me know. And put this on our website and keep getting this information out there, because it's important to the citizens. I mean, their tax dollars are at work and we're doing really good things, but the narrative I hear sometimes is that we're not doing anything.
They get focused on, when's my street going to be repaved? So,
and I totally get that.
Yeah. And when I'm looking at the plan that there are even more roundabouts on the planning, on our plate than I even realized. And that's something that I think our community is unfamiliar with, and how to maneuver a roundabout. I was in Santa Maria earlier today, and I, oh gosh, what lane do I have to be in? Because I'm not used to it.
Mm-hmm.
Will there be some kind of educational, this is how to, I know that's driver's ed, but I think there will be a transition period where we need to get used to that form of intersection. Do you have any ideas on how you approach that?
Well, I believe the Public Works Department has a video that's on the website that shows you how to drive a roundabout. I think that, certainly I was just in Scotland this year and watched very intently how they drive roundabouts. Really it's about, I'm kind of going on like this long arc tangent to answer your question. Really it's about if folks are unsure how to proceed at a roundabout, one, you could practice out at 46 and Vineyard, right? That's a great one because it doesn't have a lot of side street traffic very often. It's a lot of through traffic there. We're also going to have a roundabout probably at around the same time at Wisteria and New Airport Road out there. And that'd be very low volume because there's just not a lot of through traffic yet. But basically, you come to the intersection, you look to your left, you yield if there's an oncoming car, and then once there's a gap that you feel comfortable with, you can enter the roundabout. And then, and I say this because I went to Scotland, is the one thing I noticed that they blinker out. They use their blinker when they exit the roundabout. And that's very important because if we can all get used to that, and this is part of the education component, I actually changed my signature to on my signature now, it just says that, the fourth thing you do when you go into a roundabout is you blinker out, meaning you use your turn signal and you indicate to the other drivers where you're going. I think that's going to be very important for everybody in Paso Robles, especially as we get all these roundabouts, that's just like common courtesy, trying to let people know where you're going. But it's just going to be a period of learning how to do it. There is no easy way to rip off the Band-Aid for folks who have never driven. It's just a function of doing it. It's like driving for the first time. You kind of got to get used to it.
Well, I know that some are configured differently. The one that I approached today, I'll just use that as an example. My 24-year-old daughter is beside me. She's never approached one. She goes, Mom, what lane you're supposed to be in? And it wasn't real clear what lane I needed to be in to go straight. I knew I had to go around, but will there be a lot of signage on the road and at the intersection? I think those are some things that would help.
Typically there's a sign that indicates, like, when you're coming to the next road, it'll be a sign and it'll say the road and then your exit you're supposed to take. All the roundabouts that we are building are single lane. So they're not going to be double lane roundabouts. We're not there yet.
Okay. That's what I was approaching.
Maybe in 20 years, Union Road. We designed Union Road to be a double lane roundabout. So there's room there for that in the future. But for now, it'll be single lane. And there shouldn't be, besides like a right turn slip lane, where you have a right turn and you can just bypass the roundabout, there shouldn't be any issues with, what lane I should be in. It's basically you're in the lane. Any
pedestrian or bike paths integrated within any of our roundabouts?
Yeah, so they all have so any roundabout you design typically has, let's talk about bikes first. You can ride your bike through the roundabout in traffic because that's the rules of the road, or you can exit onto a class 1 bike path, go around the roundabout, share it with PEDs, and then get back on the street you want to go on. But you may have to come to a crosswalk with state law, get off your bike, walk across, get on the other class 1. So it's surrounded by a class 1 bike path. So if you're a new, like a rider who is unsure of themselves, through a roundabout, they can get off the roundabout right on the sidewalk and then get back in the
Because I know
lane.
we're trying to have that interface.
Yeah.
I guess the only thing I would say in your presentation is to be able to have that community outreach. I think Paso Robles isn't used to it. I think there's going to be some resistance to it. And I think in a friendly context, this is, how to maneuver. Just some thoughts. That's enough for now.
Yeah, thank you.
Commissioner Gibson.
Thank you. Now, I would echo Commissioner Davis's comments. I think this is really needed in the community. This last election cycle, there was obviously a lot of conversation, some of which people were indicating that there was no infrastructure going on or any plans towards infrastructure, but I think is probably the furthest from the truth. So just making people aware, I think, is really important. So I will take you up on that Exhibit C that you had up there, the list of projects. I think that would be hugely important. I would actually think that would probably be a leave behind if I was ever doing a presentation. There's probably going to be like 3 pages that I would leave behind, all my that would be the list. And then I would do those 2 maps just for some feedback, just saying these are major arterial roads, bridges and stuff. So people get the idea of the scope, and you can leave that behind your Rotary meetings or your Lions Club meetings or whatever. I think people would be hugely surprised and educated how much is going on. I do have a couple of questions, though. I perused the link. I went online and looked at the link to pull down it says this circulation element was adopted in 2019, but one of the pages I looked at said it showed that it identified that the roadway segment utilization, basically showing the capacity utilization, was dated 2017 and then year 2045. So obviously this is like 5 to 6 years old. How often does that get updated?
Typically, is it every 10 years?
The utilization?
The utilization. Well, we update it every time we update the circulation element.
Okay.
So, and we take into account even undeveloped property. So based on its zoning, we look at if it's undeveloped at the time we're doing the circulation element, like in this case in 2019, we look at the zoning that's approved for the lot, say a single family residence. We look at the max zoning, and then we look at typical generation rates of traffic from that. And it's pretty typical because we have that data over years. So we take that all into account, the built environment and the unbuilt, add that traffic together and see what capacity utilization we're going to have, with whatever project we're doing. We update them for projects. Like, for instance, we updated it with the Veneto project. And then we looked at it from going out to build out based on all that land use, all the existing traffic. So we've got a pretty good idea, but we're constantly reevaluating it and making sure that, there's some new project isn't, going to blow it out. And if it is, then we got to take maybe some type of travel demand management strategy to reduce trips. That kind of thing.
Yeah, I think what you're commenting is on point with where I'm going with this is that, again, just listening to a lot of public comment recently, people complaining about the traffic and then complaining they're seeing these new projects coming online, and then they're complaining about what they're saying is it's already bad traffic or it's noticeably increased over the last couple of years. Now, when this thing goes through, it's just going to get worse. It'll be a nightmare. So I was just curious, just because it seemed like, again, this is, 5 years old. At some point, it would seem that maybe we'd want to know that before 10 years, but that's just a comment. 46 West, I didn't see anything up there. I was just cognizant because the advantage of being on the planning commission is that we sat through all these hearings and we've seen all these projects and we know kind of what's coming. Vast majority of people aren't even aware of that. So I've had many conversations recently where I've tried to describe how the Vine Street is going to be rerouted and what have you. But what's going on with 46 West? And I thought that was pretty much planned, or at least I thought that the city pretty much, other than us building that bridge, that we pretty much had done everything that the city was responsible for, but that the Caltrans had a plan or was working on a plan to do some sort of roundabout or doing something at 46 West. Can you bring us up to date on anything that's happening in that area?
Sure, that's a 3-part project, three phase, excuse me. So it's a 3-phase project. Part 1 is complete. So Theater Drive realignment around the hotels and the Osh and that. So that part is complete. The second phase is also a city-led project, which is the Vine Street realignment. We're going to realign Vine Street out of the interchange down there where the other leg was recently abandoned for phase 1. We're going to pull it up to Theater Drive and have it connect at that location. So that mitigates a couple things. The traffic impacts from the Gateway project, which the Planning Commission approved. And how it does that is by eliminating that signal down there, that extra leg, it adds green time to those other signals at the intersection, right? So it reduces the time you sit there on average. There may be some days you sit there for a while because of congestion. We can't get around congestion. There's just some times when people all get to the same place at the same time. We can't engineer around that. But on the most part, we're going to add that green time back in, put the signal up at Theater Drive so it has less of an impact at the interchange. So that's going to make that all flow better and getting people on the freeway and not have Vine Street interfere with all those operations. And then phase 3 is the interchange itself. And that's going to be a partnered project between the county, the city, and Caltrans and SLOCOG, San Luis Obispo Council of Governments. That project, those roundabouts were double lane, and we recently redid the traffic study and now found out it can be single lane. That's one of the reasons for that is because the bridge you may hear about periodically, the Charlet Bridge, that project was unconstrained fiscally. It was like a $100 million project. It's just the city isn't not going to pull that off. Our system can handle the traffic from that part of town. So with those reductions, we're looking in the next. We're always looking for money. So if we can find the money, but that project together, those dual roundabouts, is about $60 million. So that's going to be a much bigger regional project with a much bigger share by Caltrans, which is why we've been trying to get our traffic out of there, because it's really a Caltrans problem, not just City of Paso Robles problem.
So what's the timing on phase 2?
Phase 2, so we're in design right now. We're freshening up. We're almost at 95% drawings for the bridge, as the bridge has to go across the creek, and for the realignment. So in the next 8 years, I believe 8 years from the approval, the bridge had to be delivered per the development agreement. I believe that's the time frame. And so we're looking at the next 8 years. That project, the design and funding is part of our budget. And Warren, I think, wanted to chime in.
Well, the plan right now is to have that South Vine realignment out for bid in 23 and under construction in 24.
Nice. Very, very quick. I mean, very soon. Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
We're working on the environmental refresh right now with Caltrans on that. So,
okay. Last question. So you'd indicated these AB 1600 projects. Could you maybe go into just dive? Don't take a huge amount of time because I know it's getting late. But discuss the city share and how you came up with the percentage of the city share versus the developers in essence paying what they're paying through the development impact fees.
Yeah, so we worked with consultant David Tosick and Associates. think you might have to go backwards. You know, to look at, based on the different fee areas, we had, you know, looking at how much development fair share is. You know, I'm not exact. Don't remember the exact process, but we come up with these, you know, fair estimates of how much, you know, of city traffic is going to be using it, existing city traffic, and how much of the new traffic will be using it. And so based on that split, you come up with the fair share. And so that's how you come up with these costs. As you can see here, should use my pointer, 36.69% in citywide facilities. So that's development share based on their input to our traffic system. And then the 20.77, and I think that's area A, is development share in the existing city, because there's just not a lot of new development potential.
So it looks
left.
like basically every area or every major, because I see the different numbers, somebody's doing some sort of an engineering study, traffic study, however you want to construe it, saying this is how much additional use it's going to be, and then figuring out, doing a calculation.
Yeah, you know, in AB 1600, you're required to base it on the data, on the traffic study. So it's defensible in a number of ways, even in court, you know, and to the developer, because they want to make sure they're paying their fair share, which makes sense.
Okay. All right. That is all my questions. Thank you.
Commissioner Christensen.
Kind of just a lot of my questions were covered, or topics were covered previously. I kind of was wondering, just to kind of on the minor side of things, I think one of the suggestions I would make for outreach, and this is just a suggestion, is because time is important and you don't have a lot of time to spend it out there, you know, maybe for some of the projects that are really right around the corner, like we were talking about I'm the one that mentioned, you know, some kind of marketing out to the public, you know, public service announcements, that kind of thing, the concept. But, you know, sometimes when you're driving along an area, maybe I was up at Pleasanton, and they had like a big sign of what the project was, it's coming, when it's coming, kind of the time period that it'd be there. And I got to be honest with you, it really helped me out, because I remembered it the next time I had to drive up through there, knowing that project was going to take place, and I could work around it. And I'm talking in advance, so that people, like you said, can get a real sense of, okay, this bridge concept is coming, or Creston Road improvements coming in 2023, and when this can start. And if we have places to put a few of those little signs up that people can see that on a regular basis, I think that really starts to sink in, and it also makes the city look very proactive in pushing the information, especially if they have a place to kind of go and they feel like there's actually stuff going on. Because it's always the comments that I get, same thing. Oh my gosh, they're putting this project in. We've already got a major traffic problem on, let's say, Creston Road, right? We all know that's a massive problem for the city, and it's only going to get worse. So those types of things, in my opinion, would help really give a visual sense of, because you guys are in it every day. You're in it all the time. Online, people, they're just not going to, they're doing their things during the day, and they're not, it's so much easier to visualize that when you're kind of driving by. Just a suggestion that I think you guys might want to really consider. And I'm not talking about for every project. I'm talking about really some of the real big ones that are really right around the corner. You know, I know you guys did a good job of talking about the roundabout on Union Road that got a lot of public, you know, information out there. And I think, you know, being on the radio and stuff like that helps. And that would be a suggestion for some of these large projects, to be honest with you. I think it would truly help take a lot of that back pressure off from people's questions. I know that I delved into the link too and read through quite a bit of it. So I was looking at my phone, trying to go back through my notes, because I do a lot of it on the computer. And I noted one of the overviews, and maybe I wasn't quite understanding it. It was 4A when you talked about the overview of future traffic operation, and you're referring to the CE1 diagram. And then down at the bottom, maybe you could just kind of explain this. It says, you mentioned this indicates that the major new capacity enhancements beyond those shown on figure CE1 across the city are not justified given the city's goals. I may have misread that or misunderstood it. Maybe you can kind of elaborate on that so I could understand that better.
Which can you remind
That's okay.
me where it was?
It's in your report, and it's an overview of the future traffic operation, and it's not and it talks about the information in table CE, conveying one, that most of the city's roadways operate below their capacity on a daily basis, with some exceptions, and then two, in the year 2045, only a handful of city streets are projected to have a demand that nears their capacity.
The circulation element.
Yeah, can you elaborate on, because I'm not sure I understand how that overview is made, and that's why I'm hoping maybe, because this is kind of a generalized question that comes up pretty often.
Mm-hmm. So the city used to use level of service, ABCD, as a measure of looking at traffic operations. And there's some portions of the day you're at E. So like you're standing at Bearcat Lane at 2:45, it's like level of service. And it's not a grade, but F or E or something like that, which means a long delay, right? So at some, about I think it was about 2014, the city changed to using capacity utilization, which is a fancy way of basically saying, how are you using your road? Are you using it to max capacity over 24 hours, right? So it's a way of looking at, for most parts of the traveling public day, let's ignore the night, because everybody's driven on too far at night. It's a way of looking at the road and saying, how am I using this facility? If it's a 4-lane road like Niblick, am I using all 4 lanes a lot of the time, right? It doesn't have to do with congestion, but it's looking at that delay as you're going through the corridor. Is it being used a lot? Or are we getting that use out of that road? So, you could think of like 90% capacity utilization as a level of service F. You're getting to the point where there's longer delays. It doesn't mean you never make it through there. It doesn't mean that the road isn't big enough. It just means that when when you're measuring that road, if you say, build outs at 2044, you assume that population and all that growth and all that traffic growth, if you're at 110% capacity utilization, then you got to start planning for a bigger road. But I think what it says is the circulation element is saying a lot of your roads are getting close to that at build out, but if you don't go beyond build out, and really like say double the size of your city by annexing more land, you're going to be fine if you're using that road. And so then you look at strategies. You just don't sit back and say, no, I'm not going to do anything now. You look at strategies to reduce travel demand. So class 1 paths, you look at system optimization. Like I mentioned, we're going to do a signal project along Niblick, making sure that corridor works as good and as efficient as possible in order to make sure that you can still get all that traffic through there. So
sure. And
so I don't think I answered your question, but
I think you probably are, and it's probably going deeper in the weeds than I was wanting, which is okay. I mean, it's probably more information that we would take in tonight for sure. I guess what I was going to lead off of that too is there a metric that takes into consideration because those peak times are such an issue? And what I see, for example, on the west side, just because I spend a little more time over here certain hours a day, do they really take in a metric of of the pressures that are actually put out on other avenues of travel, other streets, for example, because of those peak times, and because those roads are overly impacted. And I think that would be something that, at least for residents, it would be, in my view, it's kind of a big issue, and I'm not sure a lot of people know how to say that, right? They just look at the overall scope of like, gosh, Creston is so crazy busy. It's, but they don't express the fact that, yeah, but I can't go this direction either, or it's unsafe to go this direction here. And, so that might be something that you kind of want to.
Yeah. So when traffic engineers are looking at, like, as delay goes up, congestion goes up, people start looking for those. Right. I think I understand now.
Yeah.
Alternate routes of travel. So the west side of town, in my view, is fantastic. We have this grid system. There's tons of places people can go, and the traffic can spread out. Spring Street can be congested at certain times of the day. Everybody's been on there. And so using Vine Street, using Oak Street, using Pine are all great alternatives. And that's what happens when congestion increases, is people find those alternative routes and they'll start going to those places. That doesn't always make the people on a street that was quiet happy.
Yeah.
But
I know from example. Yeah.
This circulation system is there for folks to use. It's all of our roads. And one of the things we're looking at right now, especially when we're looking at development out by the airport, is restricting times when people can leave and enter the site, like trucking traffic, for instance. So trucks are big and longer. We're looking at potentially limiting the hours of when they can leave. So like if congestion on Highway 46 is, let's just say, 4 to 5 p.m., not allowing trucks to leave their project site or the site between 4 and 5 p.m., right? I mean, that's our biggest problem in our society. I can look at I can look at Niblick Road, and I can tell you almost on a day-to-day basis, the 15 minutes when you should not be on Niblick Road, because everybody is leaving either school or work or something else at the same time. And that's something like the city and like us can't engineer around, is this 8 o'clock, 5 o'clock dichotomy we have in our society where everybody gets on the road. There's just going to be congestion. And
I could start a whole class job on educating Uber drivers that don't live in this city when they're driving around certain parts of the day. So just one issue that I would say is, for me, obviously, because I live on the west side and I spend a lot of time there, the correlation between those offsets, right, and the infrastructure that's there. It's a constant complaint of not only mine, but other people that live out there. We're getting the offset traffic, especially certain times of day for congestion, but the infrastructure is so degraded. And I know that we've got some monies going towards that now, but as I had mentioned to Dietra before, sometimes you have to make small improvements to show that you're going the extra mile, because the image is a lot of times more important than the actual, rather than doing, say, all of 4th Street, doing a section of 4th Street, for example, goes miles in the public's image of what the city's accomplishing, right? I know you have other restraints because of the sidewalks and the handicap corners. I understand that now. But what I was trying to make a point was when I was making a point on this, and then I think it goes to effect of the argument that you're going to come against, is that people, just seeing one block done, in their mindset, it looks like something's being achieved. I'm not sure that's always the best use of the dollar, but you get what I'm saying. And I don't think that they could grasp that, because they look at it as such a large scale project that, sometimes the minutia of just completing some things really gives the public a lot of confidence. So I'm not sure if that makes sense, but
it does. And actually we just Public Works did a really good job of paving some west side streets. There's some more coming. on that project. Right now, they're working on the country club area in terms of paving. I mean, there's more paving need than dollars that we,
Well,
dollars we have.
I got to be honest with you. I know they're worked on that. We could spend all night talking about the justification for that. I'm not necessarily sure I agree with all that, but I just think.
No, I understand. I just wanted to say that I mentioned a little bit at the end, but I didn't mention it. These are just like bigger picture circulation projects. I get your point though about it's what you see out your front door is important to most people, and I get that.
It's where they're going, right? The residents are going, or they're walking even in town, that kind of thing. So
no, I mean, I think I do have some slides in my back pocket here, so to speak, on this for budget stuff. So I can certainly add the paving items. I believe that the everyday maintenance stuff that Public Works does, and I believe they're also looking at using some of the J20 money for some future projects, bringing that back to council.
Well, my understanding too is they were looking at other methods of actual improvement. I know the level of repair matters and that kind of stuff. And like I said, I just, that all factors into the picture of what people are seeing. Like I said, the country club to me would not be a priority of a paving area of where you're seeing so much traffic if I were a person that was asked. Okay, I do not see a justification in that. But that being said, like I said, little things like that will matter in the image of what people think the city is accomplishing. So
no, you got a great point, actually. That's something I totally forgot, because one of the items that is part of these is we have a paving management program.
It was what?
A paving management program. And that paving management program, basically, they looked, we hired a company, they looked at all our streets and came up with what we call a PCI, a pavement condition index. And so based on that pavement condition index, they recommended, and city council ultimately adopted, the street paving, for instance. They were on that. So I think that would be a great addition to this, because that outlines kind of like, you always want to have, everybody wants their street paved, but we kind of got to have like a fair way of.
Well, I'll be honest with you, and just so, because I know it's getting late, I read that report, and this was a few years ago, right? And I think it came out a few years ago. And just my comments on that are some of the things they didn't seem to take into account in the report is, with our growth, just in the short amount of time since that report has taken place, there's no accountability that I could find for the offset of the traffic into these other areas that has taken place. And however, I did not know this originally, and something I learned was that about the level of repair of the road, and the fact, that the lack of sidewalks and corners in certain areas on the west side that have handicap access as a requirement by the state, by law, for some of that level of repair to even take place. So I think that will help, but I just want to put it out there. I think it culminates into this, even though it's not really a big part of the strategic plan. So, all right, I'll digress.
Mr. Covarrubias.
I'll keep this short, I promise. Well,
because I love talking about this.
Well, because you nailed it on the road part of it, the conditions of the road. I noticed there was a one-line comment paving something in here, and I thought, oh boy. I love the fact that we're going to get this out, David. I think it's going to be a great report, because a lot of people do ask in the community, is the city doing anything? Do they care? So I think if you can incorporate something about the roads, the conditions of the roads, and maybe some of the plan with some of our roads, because some of them are bad. I went to go look at a house over on Lene, I think it was Lene the other day. Holy cow, that road is horrible. And I thought, this is enough to not make me want to buy a house over here, because it's bad. So anyways, but I am curious, who makes the decisions on where traffic lights and stop signs go?
Your city engineer and the city council. So what happens, let's take a street light, or not a street light, but a signal system. It's based on traffic. looking at the typically four legs of the intersection. And I have to live by this document called the California Manual of Uniform Traffic Control Devices. And within that manual, it has specific requirements for signalization of intersections. And so you have to meet these, what they call warrants, these requirements. You have to meet these separate requirements before a signal can be installed at any intersection. So, it has to do with, the balancing of the legs. You want a pretty balanced intersection, as much traffic coming on each leg, because if you don't, then you start having people like you've probably been into a stop sign where there's never any three-way stop and there's never any traffic on that side street. And what happens is you start getting the police reports, people start blowing the stop sign. It's the same kind of thing for a signal. So you really want to balance. It's one of them. One of them is safety. What are the traffic loadings? One of them has to do with congestion during school hours. There's just these different requirements in there. But if an intersection meets that requirement, then we go to the next step of doing a warrant analysis. And once that warrant analysis is complete, like an engineering report, it says, yeah, you put a signal in, we recommend this type of timing, this type of signal system. And then you go to the next step of going to council, getting it funded, getting it installed. So that's kind of how that process works. Same thing kind of works for roundabouts, but it's a little different.
Yeah, I mean, I'm interesting that you bring that comment about people running it over there off of Commerce, and it's Niblick, but I think the road changes where our Olson project is. I can't tell you how many people run that signal now, because you'll sit there and nobody's coming off of Commerce, and people get impatient, and they run it. I mean, I probably say it 2 or 3 times a week, because I live on the east side, Meadowlark Farms, and I see it all the time. So I'm just always curious, I wonder why they even put a signal here. So obviously, interesting enough, last comment, I just got back from Europe, and I was in Germany and Belgium, my first part of the stay. Tons of roundabouts, very little signals. Went to London, surprised, very few roundabouts, tons of signals. Traffic was horrible in London. Traffic in Belgium and in Germany flowed beautifully. It was amazing. So I'm happy to see that we're starting to add some of the roundabout components to things. My only fear is that our city isn't becoming too signal happy, and putting too many signals throughout our city that causes everything to come to a stop. That's just my personal opinion, and it's been opinions of others that I've heard say, Rob, why do they keep adding more stuff? And then my last comment is, when we do a project like some of this, I'm really looking forward to Creston Road. Really looking forward to that. Do they only focus on that project road that's being modified? They don't do any of the surrounding roads connecting to it, correct? Not even a little bit.
That project is only for Crescent Road. None of the side streets are getting any.
None of the side streets, none of that stuff gets done.
Maybe some ramps or something.
And that's usually the case, right?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. No more questions for me. David, thank you for the presentation.
So the beauty or the curse of being last is most of the things have already been covered. So that's a good thing. I guess I just want to thank you, David, for putting this together. You have, I don't know what we are, whether we're liaisons or ambassadors, the 7 of us, frequently to the community, because our ears get bent by people, neighbors, friends, somebody in the coffee shop. And I don't know how many times somebody comes to us and says, well, somebody told me this. So it's really helpful to have this as a background material of what's going on. So it's great that you give us this refresher periodically, and even a Christmas format that you've laid out here with the reds and the greens. So it's very nicely done, timely done, and I appreciate it because it makes us smarter in the community, in addition to helping the decisions that we make here. So well done.
Thank you.
I think we indicated we would see if there was any public comments. Are there any, Marcy?
No, there's no callers.
Okay. Being no comments, does anybody else in the commission? I asked this hesitantly.
I just wanted to say I'm excited about the bike paths so I can ride my electric scooter on them. I love getting around town on that thing. So happy that they're going to be expanding that. I think that's going to be really beneficial.
Yeah, some good stuff here. Thank you again. Okay, we will move on in our agenda to the consent calendar, of which we have a number of DRC committee minutes, as well as a couple of planning commissions. DRC from October 10, October 17, October 24, October 31, November 7, November 14, and November 21. It's a pretty extensive list. Let's take those first. Are there any changes, questions that anybody has relative to any of those meetings and the minutes from those meetings?
Chairperson Kogler, I'd like to pull October 17th for discussion.
Okay, we'll flag 17 for the moment for discussion. Are there any others? Anybody noticed any comments, changes, or discussion points needed? If not, I think we should probably proceed to discuss October 17. You have...
Yeah, it's more of a question. I don't think it's necessarily a correction, but October 17th, item 2, it says DRC final action, and it is on the proposed solar canopy for grapes and grains. This is the first time I've seen it. There's a paragraph at the very bottom that says follow-up. So in my perspective, that's not really the minutes. That's something that happened after we convened. I was not aware about this California Solar Right Act when we were reviewing the item. I'm glad Isaac is here. Isaac, wake up, we're here. This pertains to you. I just have a bit of a question, why that is in the minutes is my first question. And my second comment is DRC has in the past reviewed the structure of a solar canopy, not just the color. We've looked at circulation. We've looked at height. And so this seems to me that has circumvented our review of that project. So I just wanted to make that statement. There was a pretty healthy discussion at that meeting about, a canopy in a parking lot in a downtown core area. If Isaac can clarify, am I making myself clear? But I just didn't understand why this was in the minutes.
Sure. I can't speak to the specific preparation of the item within the minutes. I can say, planning in our office has been in touch certainly about some of the limits under the Solar Rights Act and what that means for discretionary design review. So the biggest barrier, I would say, to sort of local discretion with respect to solar installations is sort of the legislature's overarching intent there be no unreasonable barriers, and that a fair amount of applications to install solar energy systems be issued a building permit or another form of non-discretionary permit. So I believe, and I'm sure the department can speak more to specifically the note in the minutes, but we've certainly been in touch. It's not dissimilar to other instances where the state legislature, under the auspices of a statewide matter of concern, have limited local discretion for you, the decision maker, and the Solar Rights Act is one of those areas where there's some limitations on it, including on shade structures. So again, I don't want to speak specifically to how it's utilized within the October 17th minutes, but it has been something that our office has been in touch with the department regarding some of those limitations under the state law.
Okay, well, I guess I would go back to our community development department. In the past, we have reviewed the height, the circulation, and there were no drawings whatsoever presented. So this is just going to proceed without our review.
Yeah. So, and the reason we added the follow-up here is because there's no resolutions or formal really approvals to document DRC decisions other than the minutes. And this is an issue where It required additional follow-up with the city attorney, and the determination was made that DRC had come to the limits of their discretion to review this project, and we couldn't go any further. So this was the best place to kind of memorialize that. And I think staff shares Planning Commission's and DRC's concern with freestanding solar structures, especially kind of in the downtown environment, that there's a lot of issues with consistency and neighborhood compatibility. Unfortunately, the state law, doesn't consider those in some, to the same degree that we do. So we want to work with and try to make sure these fit in as well as possible. And that's why we, go through the review process, and, where we have cooperation on both sides, we can get there. But if we end up at an impasse, unfortunately, all the rights really go to the solar installer, and there's really limits on what we can look at and what we can actually control. So other than, some kind of paint and things like that, we're really honestly limited in what we can control with freestanding solar structures.
Yeah, that's disappointing. I understand. It's just disappointing. I just know that these decision makers have to talk to the community if they see something in their downtown core that isn't accentuating the beauty and the character of the downtown core. We're gonna catch the questions.
Yeah, and I think there's another example of the state preempting local control, kind of like with ADUs and SB9 lot splits.
Maybe in the future, maybe just give us a heads up. We presided and we didn't know what this was, so this surprised me a little bit. So. I'm speaking out a little bit more than I do, but I feel that we, as an architectural review committee, have been circumvented. I'm not blaming staff. I'm just saying the process seems unfair. That's all I
have. Excuse me, if I could supplement a bit. I was on DRC as well, and I think probably with some institutional knowledge, I certainly had a feeling, if not an absolute knowledge, that we had very little leeway with regard to the solar. So I had focused my emphasis more on what's kind of captured here a bit, with DRC also requested the applicant provide a robust landscaping plan and more information for proposed Corten planters and wall. My concern was there's an alley interface right behind this that from my perspective, the city has control over, and was just wanting to make sure that as you guys looked at this thing, you took into account how that separation was going to be in place and how we were going to preclude drivers from the alley from going in and under these solar panels at will. Where was that the defining point? Because I think the applicant showed fencing at one time and some other things. I don't know where that ended up, but there was concern, I think, also within this item for items that I think we do have some discretion, and not the panels themselves, but the interface with the public alley.
Yeah, and actually the applicant has submitted some preliminary plans that we will be bringing to the DRC for those site improvements, the fence, they had talked about Corten planters. So the canopy itself will not be returning to DRC, but those other site improvements that you are concerned about will return.
Great, thank you. Mr. Christensen.
I move that we accept the minutes for the DRC and the Planning Commission minutes.
And that would be for all of the October and the November dates?
That's correct, yes.
Very good. Okay, we have a motion. Is there a second?
I'll second the motion.
Second from Commissioner Gibson. Any further discussion? If not, please call a question on this, and then we'll handle the Planning Commission separately.
Commissioner Christensen?
Aye.
Commissioner Gibson?
Aye.
Commissioner Davis?
Aye.
Commissioner Covarrubias?
Aye.
Chairperson Kogler?
Aye.
Motion passes 5-0.
Okay, we have two Planning Commission minutes, and not that we necessarily usually separate these out, but since we had so many DRCs, we did tonight. October 25 and November 29 special meeting. Were there any comments, corrections, changes to those noted by commission members?
Seeing no comments, I move to approve the Planning Commission minutes for October 25th and November 29th, 2022.
I second that.
Motion from Commissioner Gibson, seconded by Commissioner Christensen. Any further discussion? If not, roll call, please.
Commissioner Gibson?
Aye.
Commissioner Christensen?
Aye.
Commissioner Covarrubias?
Aye.
Commissioner Davis?
Aye.
Chairperson Kogler?
Aye.
Motion passes 5-0.
Okay, item J on the agenda is other reports. These are kind of always carryovers from week to week, month to month. Paso Robles Streetscape ad hoc meeting, there's one scheduled for later this week.
That'd be this Thursday, which is the 15th, 3 p.m. at City Hall.
Okay, and I would hope Commissioner Jorgensen, who's on that group, would be joining us in one form or another, and I probably will be joining that time online.
Okay, yeah, we'll have both the in-person and online options available, so that will be available.
Okay, very good. Looking forward to that. Okay, item 7 is Housing Opportunities Constraints Committee Zoning Code Update. Or is he here still for that?
I'm still hiding in the back. So we don't have any scheduled meetings for HCOC, but to give an update on the zoning code. So as you recall, we had a study session a couple months ago with a chunk of where we're at with the zoning code update process. And so we did pivot a little bit with the ADU urgency ordinance, and so we did. Genevieve with MIG is retained to help us with the ADU ordinance, and so that did take some time. So we kind of put a pause on the greater zoning code, but we are, now that that's moved forward in terms of the urgency ordinance, we have another very large section that will be coming for internal staff review, and eventually it will come back to Planning Commission, and so we'll have another study session. So that's where we're at with the zoning code update process.
Great. Thank you for the update. Thanks for bearing with us to get that. Any questions for Darcy? Seeing none. Thanks again. Okay, item 8 is our DRC rotation schedule, which is getting pretty slim. We just have 3 months shown left at the moment. Any changes anybody has to make note of there or seek any substitutions? Pretty flexible to always accommodate those when they arise as well. Hearing none, we'll say it is what it is unless it changes. Okay, item K, Planning Commissioner comments. Start with Commissioner Christensen.
I just wanted to say thank you to the staff for the reports tonight and the information that was very helpful. I think it will help us in our interaction with the public as well, having that knowledge. And I just wanted to also express my frustration with my other commissioners in regards to some of the state mandated requirements in regards to some of these projects. Not that we're opposed to solar or that we're opposed to ADUs in any sense of the use, but I do have some frustration in the process, and I know that that's nothing that's staff has little control over that as well too. So that's it for me.
Mr. Gibson.
I would echo my commissioner's comments. I find it very valuable that you guys take the time to put out some of these reports, and then it's hugely important, I think, to pass that on or educate the community, and to the extent that you give us information that, as Mark indicated, we do act as ambassadors, or we share out information that dispels some things that aren't true, and try and pass that on. So I appreciate you taking the time. I think that's a very valuable, something very valuable to do with your time. So my only other comment, and you hit on it, I was actually going to mention it, Katie, was there's a project up on Spring Street. I drove by the other day, and it seems like it's a state of degradation again. Some of the building wrap had come off, and with the heavy rains, I just got to believe that there's interior damage in that building going on, and I don't see anything active since they put in windows. I think was the last thing I saw them actually doing on that site, and it's been a while. I fear we're going to have a problem on our hands.
Okay. Commissioner Covarrubias.
No additional comments.
Okay. Commissioner Davis.
I've said a lot tonight, more than normal. I just want to thank staff. You guys are so knowledgeable and so respectful and helping us along, making some tough decisions. So I do want to thank all of you and all the rest of being here and working so hard on behalf of our community. My last thing is I just want to wish everybody a happy holiday. Right?
Thank you. So it is late. I have a short story and then a question. My short story is, yeah, take yourselves back to Saturday night about 6 p.m. Remember Saturday night at 6 p.m.? The rain was coming down probably at 45 degrees, if not horizontally. Wind out of the north like crazy. Just a horrible night. Sitting relaxing about 6:15, neighbor texts, we have no water. We don't either. The whole neighborhood. There was a water main break at that time, Saturday night. So what happens? What do? Well, you go to the website, I did, and you look at the water department, and they say call the police department during off hours. So I called the police department, got a great dispatcher, told them what was going on. They said, we're aware of it. We're getting crews to the scene. We'll see what happens. They said, we'd invite you to call us back in the next hour or two if you'd like to get an update, which I thought was rather accommodating. So fine. We start collecting water as where we can and planning for how we're going to live without water for a while. And got another text an hour later from a neighbor said, our water's back. And I checked and ours was too. And so that was terrific. Went and turned on the taps and the water looked great for a moment and then it was brown and it had sediment. It was putting sand in tubs and things. It was pretty nasty. And so lo and behold, I called the police department back because they'd invited me to, and I talked to Allie, the dispatchers, and I made what I thought was a really ridiculous request. And I said, I know they're really busy, but when they get done, would you have somebody call me because I have a water problem that my neighbors don't seem to have? And she said, sure. And I thought, yeah, like I'll ever hear from anybody. About a half an hour later, Colton with the water department calls me, tells me that he and Brendan and an individual from the streets department were going to be at my house in about 5 minutes. They spent 2.5 hours at my house in that driving rainstorm, solving a problem that was somewhat unique to my situation, less so to some of my neighbors because of topography. Unbelievable community service by Allie, Brendan, and Colton and others. And I just want to shout out to those folks and to this community that's so well served by people like that are out there in the field that went beyond any reasonable expectation of communicating. They were friendly, they were helpful, and they were really, really effective at what they did. My head is off to them, and I think. So that was my short story. My question is, I noticed Sunday morning there was a rescue in the riverbed, and I was curious, was there a cleanup at the beginning of the rainy season, or will there be, or what's happening with river cleanups and hazardous situations with both for people that are there as well as environmental issues?
So there was a river rescue that was conducted by the fire department Sunday morning that was successful. It was an unhoused person. That continues to be an ongoing issue in the riverbed. We do have a community action team that's specifically devoted to that. The city's constantly investing both personnel and financial resources into cleaning the river. It's basically kind of like painting the Golden Gate Bridge. You start at one end, you clean it up, and by the time you get to the other end, you have to start again. So it is an ongoing process that we continue to invest a lot of time and effort into, but at this point, there isn't a fix in terms of getting people out of the river. Obviously, this time of year, people in the river is extremely risky. So the police and fire department will continue to try to, get folks moved to safer areas than the middle of the riverbed, but that continues to be a challenge that we're aware of.
Next item on the agenda is staff comments.
Yes, so this is the last Planning Commission meeting of 2022. So we wanted to thank the Commission for another fine year of good work. Really appreciate everybody's efforts and support this year. A reminder that we do annual recruitments for Planning Commission. That will be starting, we've actually started the noticing right now. So I think Commissioners Christian, Gibson, and Jorgensen, your terms are up. So you're eligible to reapply for another 3-year term. Those applications would be due by February 1st. City Council is scheduled to do interviews on February 16th, and then we'll basically seat the new commissioners or reseat commissioners that first meeting in March, which is our standard process. So just wanted everybody to know about that. We continue to work on a number of projects out in the airport area. We're continuing to work, like Mr. Athey talked about, in terms of alternate routes or at Airport Road, the new Airport Road alignments, the potential Union Road overcrossing at 46. You'll start to see a number of public documents start to circulate in the next month or so regarding that. So there's a couple industrial wineries out at the airport. We're going to be circulating neg decks that have different pieces of traffic mitigation projects related to Airport Road and 46. We do expect that the mitigated neg deck that City and Caltrans has been working on for the overcrossing interchange project will likely start to public circulation early next year. And then also the Boys School Landing project, that EIR, is also scheduled for public circulation probably in January. So there could potentially be at least 4 different environmental documents all out for public review late January, all addressing different pieces of that. So ultimately, all those projects are going to come back through Planning Commission, but we do have to do the public review process. So you'll start to see and hear pieces of that. We'll definitely give you copies of the EIRs ahead of time, so you'll have plenty of time to get up to speed on those. Yeah, so that's why you want to sign up for another term to read very long EIRs. So that's what I got. Anybody else? Any updates? Seeing none, that concludes staff's report. Oh, nope, Darcy got some.
So there were
Oh yeah, do
the
that.
ADU, HCD.
Yeah, Darcy's got something cool to show you.
Well, I just wanted to remind, I think Katie was going to take the lead on it, but it sounds like there was some information at the last Planning Commission meeting about ADUs. Katie found something really neat that we wanted to share with the Planning Commission about production numbers. So we do the general plan annual report each year, and we submit, all the numbers to the state. It seems like they've compiled all that data into some really great, useful graphs and probably tables too. But so we just wanted to share that. Katie has taken more time to go through things and compare Paso to Fresno and Kern County and Los Angeles. And so we just thought it would be really fun and tool to show you guys. So.
So we'll make sure to send you the link to this, but it's on HCD's website is where we're linking to right now.
And Katie, did I
go.
misunderstand? Was it a comment made at City Council, maybe not Planning Commission?
Right. I added a slide to the ADU presentation when we went to council showing ADU production, how many units we've produced in the last, I think it was 5 years, was how much data we have. And there were years where up to 50% of the units or close to 50% of the residential units, the residential permits that we issued were for ADUs. And Councilman Bausch had asked, how does that compare to other communities? And I didn't have an answer, but I knew that HCD is, we send them a report every year, so they must be doing something with that information. So this was the tool that I found on their website. So there's a number of different major indices or different ways to look at the information, but I thought the construction tab was particularly interesting. You can search by the jurisdiction. You could look at just our county. Sometimes they have the information listed by the local the COG, the Council of Governments, so slow COG. So here's San Luis Obispo County, and then you can search by individual communities. And then, so what we're looking at here is all the housing that was produced since 2013. So in red is single-family detached units, and then you can see the ADUs, I think, are the blue color, and you can see the increase in the number of ADUs over time. One of the things Darcy and I were looking at today, we looked at I think it was Bakersfield in particular, which of course has approximately 1 million people. They produced the same number of ADUs last year, very close to, within 2 or 3 units as Paso Robles did. They were like 25, 26 for the whole city of Bakersfield, and we had a very similar number here in Paso Robles, where we have 30,000 people, of course. So that was an interesting number. The Los Angeles issued last year over 5,000 permits for ADUs of 12,000 permits, residential permits that they issued, the 5,000 of those. So they're approaching 50% of their residential units as well. So here is San Luis Obispo County. Are you on 2 and 4plex? Is that what's?
This is just, did I hit ADUs?
Well, oh no, you've on
This
ADUs.
is
The color's
ADUs.
just not matching up. Yeah. So in San Luis Obispo County, 191 ADUs last year. 25 of those came from Paso Robles. Of course, San Luis Obispo, they just have more housing production than we do, and then the county has, I think, the bigger share, if I'm not mistaken. So you can, if you click on the different bars, it will give you different information. If you click on the cities, there's a lot of information there, and you can download it in tabulated format as well if you really wanted to dig in. But these tables are really eye-catching and very useful. So we wanted to share this with you. Yes, we will. Yeah.
Everyone can thank Katie for finding this because I was so excited. I knew that those annual reports, the state did something with them.
We were hoping, yeah. Yeah, and you can also, the tabs at the top there's like overview, key figures, construction, housing needs. So if you go into housing needs, it gives a report out on how different communities are meeting the RHNA, the regional housing needs. You can look at both 5th and 6th cycle. So of course you've got to drill down to get information that's pertinent to our local region. But you can see, I think, and actually all of San Luis Obispo, we exceeded what was required of us in the 5th cycle for RHNA, not necessarily in every category, but just number of housing units for San Luis Obispo County. I can't remember that if you click on 5th cycle, it will show us. But anyway, there's a lot of information there.
Cool, good stuff. We'll watch for the link. Okay, I think that brings us to one item left. That would be adjournment. Motion to adjourn?
I move we adjourn. Yeah,
So moved.
Second it. I'll second
All in
it.
favor, aye?
Aye.